Hello.
Rajan, good to see you. Good afternoon.
Nice to see you.
Hey Rajan, good afternoon.
Hey, how are you?
Happy here.
Very nice to meet you virtually.
Thank you, Rajan, for showing up in full spirit. We see RevItUp right behind you. Thank you very much.
I've got my RevItUp.
Let's rev it up. You are starting day two. Day one ended on a very high note last night with Steve Vassallo and a few panels. So high expectations from you, but knowing you, I think it's not going to be a challenge. Rajan, especially want to thank you because I know you're in the middle of a firm event in a different locale. So thank you really from the bottom of our hearts for helping us.
These are all WaterBridge founders.
No, it's more widespread. Yeah, for the summit, it's going to be, I'd say it's 90% founders building companies in all stages, not just WaterBridge founder partners. So without further ado, I think we're just going to launch. It's just about time. We have a very busy day today. And Rajan, we know we have a time clock. We got to free you up by a certain time. Thank you for being here. Rajan, you know me. I'm Manish at WaterBridge. You know Anjali, my partner as well. We both will try and run this panel with you. You know, it's pretty cliched to talk about a speaker guest doesn't need any introduction, and yet people end up introducing them anyway. But honestly, for this audience, I honestly say that you really don't need any introduction. People know you here. So we're going to just jump into it, if it's okay with you. And I'm going to, off the bat, start with something that's a little bit more personal, to your own career. And that's also links to the theme of the panel, the summit, which is RevItUp. We're talking about, on one hand, value creation versus, valuation, revenues and profits, how to build sustainable companies. But we're also talking about how professionals and founders are able to scale their own personal dimensions in life, which is a trait that we see successful founders do have or have to have as they scale their companies. So I'm going to start with something personal. As I said, in your career has got a lot of diversity, solving big problems as a McKinsey partner for all kinds of clients across the world, to building businesses for large tech companies in, at that time, almost frontier market like India, South Asia, with Microsoft, with Dell. I know Dell was still trying to establish its feet in this part of the world when you were helping them. And of course, Google. If I dare say, you've helped add growth wings to Google's journey in India, South Asia, Southeast Asia, to then being a prolific angel investor, to now being also a fund investor at Sequoia and Surge. The question for you is, how have you learned to pivot your own life as you have navigated all of these very different kinds of professions and be successful at all of it?
Yeah, I think, well, firstly, thanks for hosting me, Manish and Anjali, and I hope that founders are learning a lot from the summit. Look, so I think, I've had a very simple principle, Manish, which is, do what you love and do it for as long as you love. But as long as you're doing it, you better give it 200%. And, the changes, quite frankly, I joined McKinsey Management Consulting. I was coming out of Stanford. And this was a time when I really wanted to work for Ford or General Motors, but, they didn't hire non-Americans. So, I just joined investment banking or consulting, but, I really enjoyed McKinsey and, did it for a long time in the Chicago office. But I left consulting because I really wanted to try something different. In many ways, sort of stopped having fun in it. And I always envied, my clients who ran these big companies. And so I said, look, let me go figure out if I can be an operator. So I did that then for 15 years, across 3 companies, as you said, Google being the longest stint. And I really loved it, right? And, I believe it was a huge change. I mean, it was a massive change. I mean, it's a different career, right? You go from consulting to being an operating leader. And then I knew though, because I always had this passion for startups, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Most of my friends are entrepreneurs. My wife's an entrepreneur, as you know, everybody's an entrepreneur. So, I've been angel investing for a long time. And I knew that at some point I wanted to see if I could sort of do investing as a career, but I didn't think it would, I thought maybe I'd do it later, but then Sequoia and Surge happened. Shailendra talked to me about what he was launching with Surge, and I really joined Sequoia for Surge. I thought it was a super, super interesting platform that was being built. So for me, it's really not been, something I've consciously thought about. I've got to change. I just do something for as long as I love it, but when I'm doing it, I'll do it, give it 100%. But then when I stop, then I try to sort of say what's next, right? And then try to figure out. And through the course of that, I think is a couple of important things, right? One is you've got to love it. I mean, you just have to love it, right? And if you're building a company, you better love it. And number one, I think number two, you got to do it for a really long time. It's very interesting, Manish. I mean, I joined Dell, and then I sort of built Dell India. We took it from $250 million to $800 million in 10 quarters. Then I joined Microsoft as a $1 billion software business. But quite frankly, I didn't know how to run scale businesses. Maybe like 5-6 years into running these big P&Ls, right? Because it's very different. So I think you've got to do it for a long time. And I mean, I basically was in operating roles for about 15 years. And I'd say probably the last 5 years is where I really knew how to do it. But even then, I was sort of learning every day. So I think just having this incredibly long-term perspective of doing something for a long time so that you can get better at it, right? Because lots of people think that they can learn something in a year or two. You really can't learn anything in a year or two, right? So it takes time to be very good at what you're doing. And probably the last thing, investing is the same thing, right? I mean, I had invested in several hundred companies. So I sort of thought I knew how to do, seed stage investing, but I really knew nothing. Because, when you do it as for real, with like serious money, I mean, it's a business, right? And so, I mean, even now, I mean, I just learn every single day. So, I really believe, Manish, that, every single day you have to get better, every single day, right? And actually, it doesn't take a lot. It just takes for you to be humble. It takes for you to really keep your eyes open. It keeps, and I have this very simple principle, Manish, that I am not the smartest guy in the room. And if I ever get into a situation where I am the smartest guy in the room, it's time for me to leave, because I'm going to just stop developing, right? So, I mean, and all these companies I work with, my Google team was literally like, orders of magnitude smarter than I was. And then all my colleagues at Sequoia, my gosh, they're so much better than I am. But that's what makes you better, right? So it's a bunch of these different things that I've learned over the years. But I think doing things for a really long time and having this sort of learning mindset, this growth mindset, like in our startup ecosystem over the last couple of years, with all this success, we've started seeing a lot of hubris, right? Hubris is the killer. It just kills success, because all of a sudden you're living, in a world that really doesn't exist. Let's face it, none of us are that good, right? So anyway, long answer to your question, Manish.
It was a question that, a lot can be said, especially from, somebody like you, and you shared some quite interesting nuggets. You didn't add humility, which I know has always been part of you, despite all the amazing things you've done. So if you add humility to what you said, it makes tons of sense. Thank you, Rajan, for sharing that. Anjali, I think you wanted to ask something, Rajan, off the bat. So why don't you go?
Rajan, I just want to take you back and rewind a little bit to when you actually started angel investing, and we were trying to pull a number out in the run up to this. And I think it was 150, 200. We're not quite sure how many deals you did, but just take us through the first 10, 20, and what was that pivotal moment when you actually realized this is going to become like a secular trend?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I think, I don't really know, when, when it became a secular trend, but what I do know is, I left Microsoft because I was going to do something else. And then between Microsoft and Google, I pretty much invested all of my sort of savings into startups. After that point, the interesting thing is, you have to believe.
Are you saying Microsoft doesn't pay well in India?
No, I actually invested a lot, Manish. And that's, like right after that, I became like apparently some top angel investor. But look, I've always, I think maybe rephrase the question, Anjali, is, maybe the question is, when did I become an India bull? Because quite frankly, the startup ecosystem is a microcosm of the India story. Now, of course, I invest across India and Southeast Asia. But, I think it was probably like after I'd been at few years at Dell, because, what I saw was just this extraordinary young talent, right? And at the end of the day, what does India really have? India has this extraordinary talent, right? Because you take 1% of 1.4 billion, and it's 14 million people, right? You take 0.01%, it's 1.4 million people. So if you say that there are, I don't know, 10 million really, really smart people who are agile, who are ambitious, who want to do incredible things, and if you have an unfair percentage of those folks, as a nation, you're going to win, right? Because, so I'd say, that's when I really started. And of course, it helped that I didn't quite understand at the time, 2007 and 8, that GDP per capita was so low in India, nobody had any money. I used to always wonder, why was the Dell business only like 800 million, not 8 billion? Well, because like nobody could afford to buy PCs at the time, right? But that's when it really started. And then, in terms of angel investing, for me, by the way, the reason I angel invested was because it was just a massive learning accelerator for me, right? When I ran Google, it was very interesting. My team would come and tell me all kinds of stories about all kinds of segments, but the reality is, I knew like I made all these investments in these companies. So whether it was fintech or edtech or whatever it is, I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Because let me tell you, what's really happening. So I love the learning part of it, right? And then also it gave me an opportunity to get to know interesting founders and really learn about how they evolve and so on and so forth. But I would say, late, probably by 2013, 14, I was all in. If this thing didn't work, I was going to be bankrupt. I'm completely bankrupt. So, at one level, it's, you just got to go all in and say, you know what, it's going to work. It's what entrepreneurs do, right? All these founders on the call, I assume everybody is all in, right?
Yeah. No, it's amazing. And Rajan, I'm going to butt in here because I was trying to remember. There is definitely depth in this, right? In 2009 or 10, I heard you at a business school graduation ceremony. And I remember the energy you carried. And your message was to, I don't know, whatever, 200 kids who were graduating, that they are so lucky to be born in India. You said it's India or China. This is 2010, 9-10, somewhere there. And you were actively in. You said they're incredibly lucky to be born in India or China. And if they cannot capitalize on being born in India or China and being young and starting their careers, then, nothing can help you. A kind of a message. I was full of energy. So you were clearly all in back in 2009 and 10. And clearly you were one of the early ones who took a call, and you played a massive role in this whole ecosystem enablement, if I can say that. So thank you for doing that. Rajan, I'll switch gears a little bit. Maybe let's actually go straight to the heart of, what we are trying to cover in this summit. We've seen 2 or 3, of course, we saw one mini cycle in India of venture funding in, 14 and 15. And then we saw a little bit of a winter for a year or two. I remember you and I sat down in 2016, 17. WaterBridge was getting started. So thanks for all the advice that you gave in those early years about how to navigate and build an interesting portfolio. But, we've seen a massive cycle after that. Look at the last 3 years, right? Culminating with what happened last year with 42 billion, whatever number we want to believe, of new funding last year. Of course, we're seeing what's happening in the macro. We're starting to see the effect on the private markets in the US. And India may not have caught that fever yet, but the reality is it anytime can catch that fever, and maybe this exuberance in private markets will stop. And so, our reason for picking this particular topic was that we feel in many cases in India, valuations have run ahead of real value in businesses. If you believe in that, first of all, I don't know if you believe in that, but if you do, it'll be good to hear your views on, what kind of advice do you give to both as an angel investor and of course as Serge and Sequoia? Is it a different envelope? If it's a different template of advice you're going to give founders today as they look forward for the next few years, or versus what it was maybe back in 2020 or 2021?
Yeah, no, I think, look, the advice doesn't really change, right? I mean, at Sequoia, Manish, as you know, and Anjali, I spend all my time with Surge. Look, at Surge, our focus is very clear, right? Focus on building enduring companies. Market cycles will come and go. Fundraising will either become easier or harder depending on the cycle. But one thing is very clear, right? Building an enduring company takes 10, 20 years, and building an enduring company is extraordinarily hard. And you don't become an enduring company until you generate insane amounts of cash. Right? There is no enduring company that's breaking even. That doesn't exist. So, and that's a message that is a constant sort of message. I think last year, as you rightly pointed out, really, all of 2021, every company was getting funded, right? It didn't matter. I mean, we saw this at seed stage, right? We pass on companies, and then literally a week later, it get funded. And similarly, Series A's, B's, C's, D's, all letters of the alphabet, right? Companies are raising lots and lots of capital. That has started changing, Manish. So that's already started changing in India, because we see it, in the Sequoia, because, we have a vantage point of Series A, seed, Series A, B, C, across the board, except for the truly special companies. And the special companies are defined as, they've got very, very viable unit economics. They've got market leadership. They've got very strong management teams, and they are able to consistently grow. Right. So Shailendra, my partner, coined this term called the economic engine, right? They've got very strong economic engines. Except for those companies, Manish, everybody else is going to struggle to raise money this year. Doesn't matter whether it's a Series A, Series B, Series C, and even at all levels in India, we've already seen pricing adjust, right? So Series A's that could have been north of 50 million, 60, 70, 80 million pre, in some cases north of 100, as you know. Those are all down to sort of 30, 40, sometimes 25, right? So pricing has really changed, and this was bound to happen, right? Like anytime a market goes up as fast as it did in this post during the COVID era, COVID's sort of interesting, right? First 3-4 months things were really, really quiet, and then they just picked up and they just kept accelerating till almost Q4 of 2021. So pricing has definitely started adjusting, I think. And then what's happened, obviously, since the Ukraine-Russia war is, I think there's a lot of concern, right? I mean, there is a lot of concern about what's going to happen to the global macro with the oil prices. Will we have a World War III or not? I mean, it doesn't look like Russia is going to take Ukraine anytime soon. They eventually will, but so that's all that is concerned. So what do you do in this context, right? I think one, if you've raised a lot of money, please don't spend it. Because if you just go spend it, you're raising your next round at the valuation.
I just heard a term the other day, husband your cash is what.
Yeah, I don't know whether husband or wife, but but yes, I think being very prudent with the capital that you've raised, I think, is very important. And second, I think you've got to just focus on the basics, right? Do you have an economic engine or not? I mean, like I still have companies that are trying to launch a Series A with like no economic engine, right? I mean, they have no way in which they're going to make real money, right? I mean, GMV is not money, as you know. I mean, negative contribution is a terrible place to be. So I think just focusing on, get real. It's time to, 2021 is the year of get real, Manish and Anjali. And I think it's good. I think it's very healthy for founders because, see, the thing is, you've got to understand, right? Until you start generating free cash flow, you're living in borrowed money. And the only thing you can hope for, Manish and Anjali, is somebody's going to buy you out. Because if you go public, welcome to the new world. Just look at what's happened to the public stocks. But yes, there's been a global correction, but it's get real. The moment of get real for a startup is when they go public. Because, public market investors aren't going to buy all these narratives and stories about like GMV is going to grow and eventually I'm going to have a take rate and maybe I'll generate cash flow. Bang, 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 bang. Your stock's down 50%, 60%. It's down 70%. Welcome to the real world. So, what founders should do is don't wait till you go public. Start doing it from the very early days of, just building what is considered. I mean, like, a lot of startups are not building businesses. They're like, they've got good products and they just assume that eventually a business is going to show up. Like businesses don't show up. You've got to architect your business from the very early days. And I think, so my advice is if you raise the money, don't spend the money, focus on building the business. And if you're trying to raise, make sure you can raise, because if you're still living in 2020, and Manish and Anjali, a lot of Indian founders are living in 2021. It's March 15th. What is today? March 16th, 2022?
Yeah.
I mean, we are living in a different world. I'm amazed. There's so many Indian founders are still living in 2021.
And Raj, just to kind of take this conversation back to your own, personal growth journey. Surge was a new brand within Sequoia, and it was, if I can say, a startup within Sequoia, and you really had to build out that brand. So in this own scale-up journey of yours, what were some of the things that you had to relearn and unlearn and relearn, as we say, in the early days of launching Surge with new playbooks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, firstly, I didn't launch Surge, right? So Shailendra, my partner, launched Surge with the other partners. I joined sort of in our second cohort, right? So 100% of the credit of Surge goes to Shailendra and the team that actually launched Surge. Look, I mean, for us, a lot of it has been learning about what does it really take to take a company from 0 to 1, right? My single biggest learning has been product market fit is really, 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 really hard. Most startups never get it. That's why they never actually will ever have a shot of being enduring, because if you don't have product market fit, all you're doing is you're telling a story and you're fundraising, and eventually your money's going to run out. So I would say, look, we've spent a lot of time, if you look at it, so I mean, look, our investments are really focused on, we are fundamentally betting on founders, which everybody does. We spend a fair bit of time trying to understand the thesis, can this become a very large company kind of thing? But then, we are, 30% of our investments are pre-launch companies. Another third have just launched with absolutely no PMF, and maybe 1/3 of the companies have early signs of PMF, right? So that's the profile of Surge. Now, when they start the program, which is when the world sees the companies, they have all launched. So if you look at our current cohort, they're all in market with something, right? But actually, when we made those investments, because we have an always-on investment program, we have applications that sort of we close, but then we're meeting companies every single week, deciding on companies. So basically, what I'd say is so we've actually we've changed our content fair bit to focus a lot more on, how to get to product market fit. What does it look like? What does it really take? Because that is the key, right? I would say that's the first big thing. I think the second thing is, look, we've also figured out that, for instance, like it's better to bet. I mean, this is pretty obvious, right? But it's better to bet on a very, very strong founding team pre-launch than an okay founding team that actually maybe even has PMF with momentum, because that company that is an okay founding team with momentum and even PMF will only go so far, right? And we see that. So we see some of our companies that do fine. They're never going to be enduring, but that's okay. But we see, on the other hand, right, companies that are pre-launch that have very, very strong founders. We've seen that. And then, by the way, we've also seen, we focus a lot on building an economic engine. But, even within the Surge portfolio, right? I mean, we've had over 60% of our companies raise Series A. Actually, we have some cohorts where it's been 90% of the cohort raises Series A. But now that we're in our 6th cohort, we've had companies within Surge that haven't worked. And they haven't worked because exactly to this point is they just didn't focus on building an economic engine, right? And if you don't have an economic engine, the thing is, look, you can raise a Series A. You're a very good founder. You've got a story. You've got some early metrics. At least in 2021, you could have. 2019, you could have. 2020 was a little harder. You would have raised a Series A, right? So, but the question really is, what do you do once you raise your Series A? Do you really do the right things to get to PMF, to figure out whether you can build an economic engine, that kind of thing?
So Rajan, I just want to maybe double down on one of the threads you picked on. When it's so early, right, at the stage that Surge comes in, of course, everybody does not have a PMF at that stage, and you still got to use the crystal ball to figure out that this company A has a better chance of doing a better PMF and in a finite period of time. What are sort of some of the guiding philosophies? I mean, this is again keeping in mind both founders who are pitching to early stage investors, whether it's Surge or others, but also from an investment point of view, that crystal ball, like what are some of the guiding philosophies? Is it calls on broad sectors certain kind of founder traits, or anything else? It'll be interesting to hear you talk about that.
Yeah, so I think before I'll answer that, Manish, but I think the first thing is, by the way, one of our big learnings is that you can't sort of say you're going to get to PMF in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, right? It may take you 6 months, it may take you 3 years. But what we're very clear of, until you find it, please don't do anything else. Meaning keep the team small, keep iterating, get to PMF, because if you don't get to PMF, it doesn't really matter, right? And that's where, you know, our surge companies, right? Because we invest 1 to 2 million, and then 80% of our companies are co-investors. We've co-invested with you guys as well. You know, on average, our surge company raises, you know, $2 to $3 million on average. Some of them may raise a lot more than that. So what that provides our founders, Manish and Anjali, is it gives them the luxury to actually focus on getting to PMF as opposed to raising their next round, right? So this was one of the, I mean, it's been the single biggest, probably, you know, I've had so many learnings for myself because, you know, I used to be a scale-up guy, right? I'm not a 0 to 1 guy. So everything I know about 0 to 1, I've learned at Surge, and then, you know, investing in all these companies as an angel, is that you can't really predict whether it's going to take 3 months or 6 months. But what you can predict is, please get to PMF. Otherwise, you're not going to have a business. So, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, we had like Surge 1, we're just finishing up 3 years at Surge, right? We have a company in our first cohort that just got to PMF 3 years later. 3 years later. Yeah, amazing, right? And like, actually, you know, we have a company in, I think, our 4th cohort that raised this massive Series A, but they were really smart. They didn't have PMF. They were a massive Series A, right? They have all the money in the bank, Manish, all of it, because the interest covers their OPEX. A team of 7. Wow. And they just keep iterating, right? Every month we meet them, they're like, hey, retention's improving, retention's improving, retention's improving. And, you know, I think maybe they're 2-3 months away. And now it's getting, you know, it's been a year. It's been 14 months since the Series A, you know.
But they're being sensible with their cash, is what you're saying.
They're being really sensible, right? Because again, the point is they could have spent all their money, they could have driven for growth, etc. Anyway, so that's now coming back to what do we look for? Look, at the end of the day, we just over-index on founders, right? You know, is there founder market fit? Does this seem like, you know, team? I mean, one of the things, you know, like the only thing we're really looking for in a pitch is deep insight. Tell us something that we've never thought of that makes us go, wow. Wow, as in an insight about the problem, right? And this is one of the things a lot of founders don't realize about their pitches, you know, is like, we're looking for like insight about the problem, right? Then, you know, we do a lot of ref checks, like massive amounts. Founders don't realize. We do just massive ref checks. Actually, you know, while a founder is pitching, most likely, you know, 3 ref checks have already been done in the 45 minutes. You know, we pinged X, Y, and Z and whatever, right? So,
amazing.
You know, we do that. I mean, it's not unusual for us to do 10 ref checks on a Surge founder, right? So we do that. Then we try to figure out, look, can this founder sort of storytell? Can they build a team? So anyway, all this kind of stuff that we look for a team. I think on the space, like, yeah, I mean, I think because Sequoia is a multi-stage investor, right? So, you know, seed, venture, growth. We're also a multi-regional investor. We invest a lot in the US, in China, and in Europe. We have sort of a global view on, you know, sort of what sectors are interesting, what could you do, what could you not do, you know, that kind of thing, and we leverage a fair bit of that. And, you know, if something has launched, then we look at some early data to say, we don't expect, by the way, to see PMF at seed, right? And as I said, 1/3 of the companies we invest in are pre-launch. There's nothing to look at, really. But even the ones that I've looked at, you know, we don't really expect to see PMF. But what we do expect to hear from the founders is how they're going to approach their path to PMF. You know, for instance, it will help if the founders tell us, here's how we're thinking about getting to PMF. You know, if they can't say that, highly unlikely we'll sort of make them a Surge company because, you know, they haven't even thought about the basics of getting to PMF. Right?
Very interesting. If it's okay, I'll start picking some questions from the chat and Q&A. They're all in, you know, all over. Let me pick this one. You know, this it talks about, you know, India, is it at the forefront of real deep tech innovation versus more services models, more unique to India and Bharat and India specific problems? Do you see that changing in any significant way, let's say in this decade by 2030? Or, you know, when you put that lens of an investor or founders are looking to what kind of a problem should I solve? Of course, they got to be passionate about it and have unique insights and some special angle, as you mentioned. But do you see service innovation versus deep tech product innovation mix changing from India? I mean, one of the question is.
I think it's a great question. Look, I think what Indian entrepreneurs are really, really good at is business model innovation, right? What did Jio really do? Jio didn't invent 4G, right? Jio basically came up with a way to deliver, a gigabit of data at 15 rupees or 25 rupees now or 30 rupees now and make money on it, right? So, and you see this time and time again, right? What was Flipkart? Flipkart was basically e-commerce, and they innovated for India, right? So they did a lot of things that were very India specific. So I think we are very, very good at that. I think the second thing that we're very good at is, sort of competing, leveraging the India advantage to compete globally. So Freshworks, right? Freshworks, so you talk to Girish, he's competing in red oceans. That's their stated strategy, right? They're not going to try to go win blue oceans. So, and I think there's just a massive, by the way, I don't know whether you know this, Manish, India's share of global SaaS is 2%.
Yeah, I knew it was sub 10%, but just 2%. Wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, 3 years ago, we didn't have any SaaS unicorns. Now we have like 15 SaaS unicorns. We have 2% global market share. So that means like we could easily have like 500 unicorns or whatever, right? Now, anyway, so those are the things I think we're really good at. Now, I do think this year we will, over the next decade, we will see real innovation, right? So I can't tell you the exact company, but we are currently, Roy, who's one of our partners, deep tech partners, he's evaluating a company that you wouldn't see in India. Just wouldn't see. And this is like a massive bet for us, right? It'll be like, oh, wow, let's just, if it works, it'd be super cool, but it may not work. So I think we will begin to see.
And this is just, sorry, interrupt. Is this hardware plus software?
Yeah,
is it?
Yeah. Okay. It's not pure software. So, and then, even within the search portfolio, right? We have some companies like Last9. We have a bunch of companies that are doing some stuff that one would consider to be deep tech, right? Dev tools, and so on and so forth, right? We have within the Sequoia portfolio, we have companies like Bioformis, which is doing AI in healthcare. So I think we will begin to see a lot more of this as the skill base in the country continues, and so on and so forth. But my view is, Manish, that there is so much opportunity, right, for business model innovation. Let's look at agriculture. India, 20% of India's GDP is in agriculture. There's been very little innovation, right? We made our first ag tech investment 3 years ago. Now we have about 6 or 7 companies. We will easily have, just within our portfolio, 5 unicorns by 2025 in ag. Why? Because it's like $100 billion, it's a multi-$100 billion space that has had no innovation, right? Now, is that deep tech? Absolutely not. But do I want deep tech in it? No. I want to make lives of farmers better, right? I want to streamline supply chain. So anyway, it's a long answer to your question. We will see deep tech, but deep tech for the sake of deep tech is a bad idea, right? Deep tech to solve problems is a really interesting idea. So if you look at Bioformis, they use AI in healthcare to actually, solve problems in healthcare, right? So that's interesting.
Yeah. Super interesting. And of course, in the purest definition of deep tech, a lot of other things in the ecosystem also have to come together, which we do lack. It is going to be on a slow gradient, as you said, but the focus should be on solving real and large problems. Very interesting. I'll pick another question. Product market fit, somebody is asking, a couple of people are asking, gets talked about a lot, lots of definitions. Is there an easy way to define what product market fit is?
Actually, there's no easy way to define it other than, you do hear people saying you know it when you have it. And that is very true because, it just becomes less harder, But what I can say, Manish, and within Search, we've done this now, for every kind of business, right? If you're an ed tech company doing XYZ, or if you're a gaming company, if you're a social commerce company, if you're a B2B SaaS company focused on US mid-market, you're a B2B SaaS company focused on US enterprise. For every kind of company, we are now at a point where we can sort of tell you what it should roughly be. Okay, so let's take one short video app in India. Okay, so what was TikTok? TikTok monthly retention was 40%. Okay, that was the best. So if your monthly retention as a short video app in India is 13%, you have no PMF. Like none, zero. Why? Because 87% of your customers are gone at the end of month 3. Now, if you're 33%, actually you're pretty good because the world's best was 40, right? And we have a few apps that I think are getting maybe not to 40, but getting in that high 20s, early 30s, right? So if you're and for instance, if you take a SaaS company, right? let's say you're telling a revenue first SaaS company, i.e., you're selling to the US, maybe you're selling to mid-market or to enterprise. I mean, look, quite frankly, if it's really hard for you to sell, if you've got a 15K ACV and it takes you 6 months to close a deal, you don't have PMF, because you just don't. The math will never work. So what I'd encourage founders to do is, depending on the, all of you are building a specific kind of business, talk to your mentors. If you have investors, talk to them and really try to understand. Like, we have a company called Veera Health, right? Veera is basically a digital health company that's focused on PCOS. There are 100 million women in India, right? So for them, it was very clear. They have like 4 or 5 metrics they're trying to hit: renewal rates, NPS, gross margin, and CAC. If they can hit those 4 metrics, they'll have PMF. And by the way, they've been spending the last year trying to get to these 4 metrics. To my point, it doesn't happen in 3 months, because you've got to get to these before you start scaling. Because if you start scaling before that, it's going to be a leaky bucket.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Very interesting. Anjali, I think you have a question.
Yeah. Rajan, given the context that you've just set on, the dark winter ahead, if I may, and there are a lot of founders here possibly looking to pitch to us as, young professionals looking to start up this year. Any words of wisdom or advice on what they should be doing differently, as you said, in 2022, and what should we be doing?
Should they even do it? Should they still do it?
Of course. I think these periods are much better to start up, because you get real. You've got to solve a real problem. You've got to build a solution that people want to buy. Ideally, they're going to pay you more for it than it costs for you to make. Simple things like, if you're selling for less than what it costs you, that's not a business. That's you go raise money from somebody else and subsidize it till you, and then you hope for the best, right? So, by the way, some of the most interesting companies on the planet have been formed, have been founded during periods like this, right? Stripe was founded in sort of period like this. PayPal was founded in a period like this. And it kind of goes on. So, yeah, I think it's a great time to be starting. The only thing is, make sure I think not a lot of founders, when they start up, ask this question of, is this really going to be your life's work, right? Have you found a problem that you're so passionate about? And by the way, it's fine to discover, right? You do explore, you try to find different types of problems. But like, is this a problem that you're so passionate about, where you can see yourself spending the next 10, 15, 20 years? Because if you're going to build an enduring company, it's going to take that long, right? And the reality is, you're going to have 4 or 5 near-death moments along the way. And the only thing that's going to keep you going is, you just really, really want to solve this problem. Otherwise, you're just going to give up and move on and, sell the company or whatever it is, which is also fine. But, you're not going to build a great company. So I think it's a great time to be starting up. But you got to I think the year for this year, Anjali and Manish, is get real.
Get real. That's the message.
Get real.
Got it. Super interesting. Rajan, we're sensitive of time. Maybe one thing where we sort of started this chat was, something personal. And this is and I know you for many years, but I've always wanted to ask you, like, I've been on many boards with you. I've been on monthly MISs with you and new investment calls. You bring this, 200% energy to every meeting. You're always over-prepared. You read everything. How do you manage to do all of this? Is there like a personal secret you want to share with, 100+ participants that are here right now?
Zero inbox. Every single day. Zero inbox.
Is it all bots, or you make it happen?
No. I read. I obviously, I do have a system that screens things, but I read everything. So, actually, the zero inbox thing is very helpful, especially for those of you that are running. I don't know how many of these founders ever, if you have more than 30, 40 people, you're probably scaling pretty fast. If you don't have PMF and you have 30 people, please be worried. You have too many people. I can't tell you how much of that I see now. Companies have 40 people, they have no PMF. It's like a real big problem. But like, once you have a certain number of people, it's very important to have zero inbox, because otherwise your team is waiting to hear from you. Yeah. Right. And you don't want to do that. And the other thing is, look, if you're going to go into a meeting, you might as well be prepared, because otherwise, what's the point, right? Like Jugaad doesn't scale, Manish.
Yeah.
And most entrepreneurs love Jugaad. The problem is that one of the reasons most entrepreneurs don't scale is, they think Jugaad scales. Jugaad doesn't scale.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess in all your humility, you did say, I'm not saying I'm agreeing with it, but you did say that you don't want to be in a room where you're the smartest person. So essentially, you're also saying that you would rather prepare, work hard, and show up with your full 100%.
Yeah,
Very
yeah.
interesting.
By the way, there was a question on what is the full form of PMF. It's product market fit.
Yeah, product market fit. Perfect. And you've already given your view on how you look at product market fit. Very interesting. There were some things in the chat, but I'm not going to pick those up just in the interest of time. Rajan, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much for your time and your words of wisdom. Any parting message for this audience? This is primarily mostly entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, existing entrepreneurs.
No, I mean, I think, look, Manish and Anjali, first of all, thanks for having me, and founders. It's great to always be able to spend time with founders. Look, I think the next decade, Manish, I'll probably wrap with this, right? In many ways, everything we've seen so far is the trailer. India's GDP per capita is $2,000. I'll tell you, we always also invest across Southeast Asia. Indonesia has $4,000 per capita. Indonesia's e-commerce market with 250 million people is larger than India, growing double the rate. Okay, so what does that really mean? What that means is the best is yet to come, right? So if you're starting a company now, if you're building a company now, I mean, it's just going to get superbly interesting every year that goes by. Markets will get deeper, talent markets will get deeper, etc. So yes, this year is obviously going to be tougher, but I think it's good to get real. I think getting real, the earlier in your career that you can get real, earlier in your startup's journey that you can get real. Because see, by the time you're valued at $5 billion and you lose $30 million a month, it's hard to get real. It's like, how do you get real?
Little too late.
Little too late. So then basically the only strategy you have is hope. And hope is not a strategy. So I think it's just a great time to be building a company. I wish everybody all the very best. And keep in mind, it's 2022, and 2022 is not 2021.
Get real, and then when you get real, you can rev it up.
Exactly. Get real and rev it up. We added that.
Rajan, so nice to have you here. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks.
Take care. Bye-bye. Request for the audience to maybe just hang on. We have a very interesting panel coming up with three very bright, successful, and forward-looking entrepreneurs building three very interesting companies. Just stay on. We're going to start in the next minute or two.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please give us a minute or two while we allow all our panelists to come on board. Hey, Mohit.
Hi.
Great. Everybody's here. Just give me a minute while I set up your screens, and then we're good to get started. We'll start in 2 minutes at 5:30. That's when this panel goes live. Thanks.
Good evening, Anshu, Mohit, Angad.
Hi, Manish. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm sure.
Thank you, everybody, dialing in with full spirits. I see RevItUp in the background. We have a minute, so we'll just start in a minute to settle down. Is everybody in the Indian time zone?
I am.
Yes, Manish, very much.
Great. Okay, cool. We'll start. It's been, look, it's day 2 for the summit. So lots going on. We started on a high note, ended on a high note last night. Rajan just kicked off this evening's proceedings. Rajan being Rajan, it's, always just highlights the opportunity, but with a lot of realism. Today, one of his message was for entrepreneurs to get real. Times are changing. Winter is coming, which I don't have to tell the three of you. Look, I'm not supposed to call favorites, right? I mean, I've had the privilege to work with all three of you in very, very close quarters, situations, through ups and downs in your respective businesses. But you do happen to be three of my super favorites. I'll say, I know I'm going to get, not going to get some hate mail from at least some people, but it is what it is. Well, pleasure to have you here. Look, maybe just to set the stage again, the theme we picked up this year is RevItUp. And if I was to crystallize it into 2 or 3 sentences, it's really, we know times are different. We've had 2-3 fantastic years in India, globally, for this, asset class of startups, if there is something like that. Things are changing very quickly. And we thought it would be prudent to talk about from different lenses, of different stakeholders, but it would be prudent to talk about building value in businesses rather than just valuation. And the other piece is that we often ignore, that there's a human dimension to building businesses. Businesses are being built at high velocity. But what about the founders? People like you who are, really creating amazing things, but you're also like pivoting yourself every day, every week, every month, and building new muscle, in different dimensions. So a big part of the RevItUp Summit was also to think about how do, founders build different dimensions in their leadership, evangelization, operational, strategic stuff, so on and so forth. So keeping that context in mind, I would appreciate if you maybe look at least most of the questions with that in mind. The audience is look a mix of folks, but I'd say 90% it's entrepreneurs. So folks like yourself, maybe some of them have their businesses that are, at the stage where Magic Pin or Chalo or City Mall is, but others are maybe still early in their journey. We kept the topic to, we named the topic to be Holy Grail of unit economics and scale. It is truly a holy grail for businesses that are, trying to build something enduring and sustainable. So without further ado, I will just, so what I'll do is let's have a freewheeling session. I will ask some questions. Feel free to jump in and answer. We'll see if we can have like specific questions for each of you. But if not, consider it, for all of you. Like I said, all three of you have been in the market as entrepreneurs for a while. You're not newbies. So I'm sure you'll find some context in your respective business vis-a-vis all the questions. And then I'll keep picking some threads from the Q&A as well. So if you allow me, look, I want to just start with, maybe let's get to the root of it, right? I'll give you this a quick number, a statistic that I used yesterday in one of the panels. Zoom, the platform we are using today, was 30 billion market cap just before COVID hit in March of 2020. And it peaked at 180 billion. Today it's 29 or 30 billion again. Maybe it's a good sign that the pandemic is over, and Zoom saw what it saw in those 2 years. But look, the pandemic has been a game changer for a lot of businesses. And I know personally that all three of you have, you've had to pivot or make some changes or maybe adjust your velocity of how you're building your businesses and so on. So maybe I'll just start with this. Can the three of you, maybe we'll start with Angad, followed by Anshu, followed by Mohit. Like, what have been your guiding philosophies during the last 2 years as you were navigating through COVID? Angad, maybe we'll start with that.
Sure. So Manish, like you said, these have been unprecedented times. Very, very. We haven't, nobody expected that COVID would hit us and hit us so hard. And during that journey, when it hit us, it was like really all of us were stunned. For us, in fact, it was more like a demand side tailwind, but a fulfillment side nightmare to manage. So these were really unprecedented times. The guiding principles for us, Manish, were largely where the variability is so high, we regrouped as a team and said, let's index ourselves on two aspects. One is agility, because we don't know how the externalities are going to pan out. So let's be super agile. Time frames. Let's reduce our time horizons as we are planning, and be more tactical, less of strategic, because we don't know how the macros are going to play out. So our sort of directionally, we actually went the opposite side. Be more and more tactical and just play it by the day, by the week, and at the same time, emotionally, it hit us, very, very hard. Inside the team, to our community leaders who are our partners and consumers. And whatever we did, which is the second guiding principle was to be as empathetic as possible, empathetic to our consumers, to our community leaders and team. And we did sort of multiple actions, initiatives around these two guiding principles, which is to be more agile and have more empathy in how we are building stuff out.
Interesting, very interesting. And I know you've seen actually quite a bit of tailwinds on the demand side, as you said. Yet it's, I want founders to take away that tailwinds doesn't necessarily mean it's all good stuff. It still creates challenges, especially when you have a crisis of this nature that is affecting people, their families, and so on. Anshu, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, Manish, thank you so much for having me. And Rajan's piece was also very interesting. So let me start by saying that, leave aside the COVID and the human side of it, but cycles come consistently, right? We've all been around, we've seen these come and go. It's a great time to build the business. Otherwise, the distractions are too many. I still feel there is enough and more of fluff. It should go away even more, such that we can build in peace. Now, the only piece is that you should have the capital to be able to do that in peace. This time around, I would say we are fortunate. Last time around, we were not. Really, was in a very meaningful way, because our business is about discovery of offline retail. If people are not going out, there's no discovery happening, right? And you're there, right? You've seen us through all of it, and we are thankful to the wisdom of yourself and our board that we've been able to see the long term. And the guiding principle for us, the question you asked, even at that point, was that, is this service required in the long term or not, right? And if the answer to that is yes, then we are on our mission, right? Then we need to just, as Angad was also saying, right, be tactical, find a way to get through this, because it's not that it's going to go away, right? We need to then just keep building towards that. And that's what we did. One very strategic thing that we did is we realized that, so our business is about driving business to local retail, and we're doing that by sending people to those stores. When COVID came in, people are not going out. So we, on the same month, I remember end of March, right? We said we'll start home delivery, and it was very contentious. I remember you saying, "Why are you doing that?" Right? And now I would say, and last board meeting,
I'm guilty. My crystal ball is not clear.
No, not at all. Right? It's also a matter of what else do we do? So if our merchants want it, our users want it, we should start doing it, right? And the team kicked into survival mode to say, makes sense. And we had been discussing it, but dragging our feet on it. None of us wanted to get into logistics to the extent we can stay away from it. But once we started to do that, it built a natural hedge. The second COVID wave came, we were far more robust. The third came in, we were even more robust, right? So now we've got two engines that are running, right? Taking people to stores and then getting stuff from stores to people. And our long-term mission to say that India is a country where local retail is been there for generations, right? These stores are not going to roll over and die as online commerce vertically integrated comes in. They will service our society. And to that extent, we are there to be that platform that connects these users to these merchants, right? So if that remains true, then we need to up our game continuously such that there is an effective marketplace that's getting built. So I would say that had been the guiding principle. People reacted very positively to say, okay, we are here, we'll see things through. Again, we are going into a cycle, but I would say like cycles are good. Like I look at this as an opportunity. Of course, our business also gets impacted, but thankfully this time it's not a consumer cycle, it's a financial cycle, right? So it's okay, it's good.
That's very well said. The last time around it was a consumer cycle and you had to go back to the root of the value proposition. This is going to be a cycle of a different nature. Very well said. Very interesting. And you are, I think your balance sheet wise, you're okay.
For now.
For now. Mohit, I think for people who don't know, of course, Chalo is also one of those businesses that saw the hardest of COVID, just because it's a mobility business. If people are in homes under lockdowns, they don't take a bus, they don't travel, they don't just travel at all. Yet you have built I mean, if I can be fair and remove my biases, you built a 2, 3, 4x better business through COVID. So clearly you had some guiding philosophies that have worked for you. Would you mind sharing?
No, Manish, thank you so much. Thank you for having us actually here. And it's a great topic that you picked up, to be honest. I always believe that it's one thing to start up and then to scale up. But when you don't do that, you literally screw up, and you don't want to be in that club at all. But yeah, coming back to, the guiding philosophies for COVID time, I think first of all, as Anshu said, it's rare that you build a large business without hitting a wall at least once, right? We have hit a couple of times as well, but you at least hit it once. And what helped us most actually was our experience of facing the crisis in 2008. Carvalho days actually. I still remember one of the slides in Sequoia presentation, which was viral around that time, was that the light at the end of the tunnel was not a ray of hope, but it's a train coming at you. So we look at everything, very, very differently. There are three things I could summarize actually. The first one was, we told ourselves that no matter what, we will survive this, whatever it takes. And everybody is still a lot more optimistic about it. Buses came to a halt, literally zero, there's nothing. But we knew that it's a category which has no alternative. Cost of traveling in a bus is so cheap that there's absolutely no alternative. You can't go and buy a second-hand car and a two-wheeler if you don't take bus. So that was the first thing, that let's just stay on and it will come back. I think the second thing is we knew that we'll have to cut once and deep. We do not want to go back to the team and make adjustments and cuts every now and then, right? You make an adjustment in March and then go into it in April, hoping the COVID will end in May, and then it doesn't end, then you do one more. We did not do any of it, right? Whatever I did in March, it stayed on until the COVID got over. So nobody has to go through that pain again and again, actually.
That's March of 2020, to be clear for us.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. March, something like 15th of March or so, right? So do it once and do it well, so that no one has to go through this pain again, right? That was the second one. I think the third thing was that it's just so important not to let an opportunity go waste, right? Let it go crisis waste, actually, right? So we said, what do we get out of this fundamentally? And what can change our industry and business in a more fundamental manner? For example, we automated 70% of all our on-ground operations. As a result, today, we run maybe 3 or 4 times more buses with 1/3 of the people on the ground. That's just like a fundamental change to the business, right? You get a 10x, 12x leverage on it. Another example would be,
and it was always a priority, if I'm hearing you right, but you get in the scheme of the business, you don't prioritize it.
Yeah, you're a whirlwind every day. You never do it, right? You do it for a customer, you do it for your operators, you don't do it for your own team. that teams take the backseat every day, but you had a 5 months of good lockdown. You can sit at home and really know how I should have built this business fundamentally, and you go and build that actually. Right? So that was great. Another example I would give is that, we figured that 90% of the infection risk in catching a virus inside the bus lies in interaction between conductor and the passenger if they're buying a ticket and exchanging cash. So if that's the highest risk, we could educate everybody around it and said how a Chalo card or a Chalo app will make it easier and safer to take a bus, and why a bus would be a safer. So we were literally riding the web, telling everybody to run a safer bus. And that made us literally like it looked like a leader in that category, at that point of time. So these are, very broad 2-3 things I would say.
Very interesting. All three of you. Look, you faced, there are actually 3 very different businesses. Anshu's and his team are cracking offline retail, making it better for consumers. Angad is just almost creating a new habit in assisted commerce, and building micro entrepreneurship along the way, especially where consumer behavior is different in tier 1+ towns. And Mohit, I think I used to say you were in the Bhopals, Indores, and the Mysores, but looks like you've also captured Mumbai recently. So you're just all over India now, solving a very basic mass commuter problem. So you've seen all these, the challenges have been very different for you, and that's very clear. And it makes sense you've had your own guiding philosophies around this. I want to bring all of us back to the core topic of the panel, right? Unit economics at scale. And I know this is something I'm sure you discuss this internally a lot. Boards also have a way of focusing on it more at certain times than others. But at least one of my learnings, as well as a conundrum, has been sometimes when unit economics works at a smaller scale, it's not always true that it'll also work at scale. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, how do you look at, are there inflection points where the small unit economics also works on big unit economics or works at scale? And I don't know how to I'm sure I could frame the question a little better, but how could you, were there moments in your own company building journeys where you felt like unit economics works, but it also works at scale? Just throw some light on that. And the hope here is that founders here can
Manish, that reminds me of a joke. If I don't know if you remember, coming out of 2000 bubble was, people used to say we lose a little money on every customer, but we make it up on volume. That's rubbish, right? You lose money on every customer, but you make it on a volume. And this I think went out. Yeah. But anyway, if you want someone to go, otherwise,
Mohit, why don't you start this time? And I think Angad was maybe after. Angad will go after you.
Yeah, so this joke actually, then it went out of fashion for a long time, I guess, but it's back again in the last few years. And also, I think this is particularly common in a startup that don't pass that Peter Thiel monopoly test, right? And these companies will spend a lot of money, rather every available dollar on acquiring a user. And if you raise prices and you go try and fix your unit economics, the customer defect to a similar service, right? And therefore, I think my opinion is that, and maybe I'm a little last decade entrepreneur, that most great companies historically will have good unit economics soon after they begin monetizing. Even if the company as a whole lose money for a long period of time, that's acceptable, And I think investors have always been willing to invest in money-losing companies that may eventually make a lot of money. And also, the founders who have raised a lot of money are at particular risk. And I see this so often, actually. It's so tempting to paper over a problem with the business by spending more money instead of fixing the product or the service side. And I've been a victim of that as well. Similarly, if you ask me, so coming back to the topic, it's always important to fix unit economics. And as a founder, I think I stay very, very aware, and everybody should be. Unless there's no other way to operate in your business, then it's a very, very bad business. So the business has to make money, I think, irrespective, because the unit economic has to be there. You may say, I will make a lot more money. For example, in my case, I will look at a bus and say, if I had a bus, I would not lose money beyond 2 months or 3 months, right? As soon as I optimize the bus and I start monetizing it, I should be making money. or an operating level. Otherwise, it's a fundamental bed business. Then there's no
For
literally
you,
hope to say-
the core unit has been the bus, that you want to make money on every bus that Chalu is operating.
Yeah, this is interesting because what you define as a unit is very, very interesting. And for example, we spend a lot of time to look at the denominator, what really makes the sense. It could have been for us a customer, it could have been a ride, a route, or a bus, or a city. It could have been any of those things. And again, whether you define a CAC or a contribution margin, you got to look at the denominator and say what I really want to solve for. And in our case, it's a bus. And I will tell you later maybe why bus, but it makes a fundamental difference on how you drive the business. So personally, my opinion.
Your point is, if the unit is defined right for your particular business, then scale unit economics comes automatically. If the unit is defined properly, denominator is defined properly. Yeah.
That's right. And I think it's very fundamental. Say you want to build a product, or a business which people are spontaneously liking to recommend, right, to others. That's one. And also you want to make it easy to understand business, right? And I think then the unit economics possibly solves for itself. Otherwise, as you get bigger, it gets worse and not better, actually. So so
Interesting.
Yeah, so I would, sort of, we've seen last almost 24 months, we are doubling our business every 75 days. So we're really seeing fast growth. The biggest learning, Manish, for me has been that scale is really deceptive. The question.
Sorry, say that again. Scale is really.
So benefits that you get out of scale can be super deceptive.
Deceptive. Okay.
Yeah. The bigger question that we ask ourselves is that, are we scaling the problem or we are scaling the solution at every unit level? And the devil here is in the detail, I believe, where what you see in your P&L, CM1, CM2, or your profits is an outcome of multiple operating metrics in your business, and that's different for different businesses. And some of the operating metrics need to be solved at a unit level, at a smaller level, and then there are certain other numbers or metrics that only sort of make sense at scale. For example, you can't solve customer experience at scale. You need to solve it at a unit level. For gross margins in our category, that sort of comes with scale. So we have to be like really detail oriented to understand which are you sort of scaling the problem or you're scaling the solution, and that's sort of the framework that we take.
Very good. Anshu?
Yeah, Manish. So I think let me first just build on the same line of thinking around how do we think of economics in our business. We think of economics, and this is also after some learning, at a locality level. We know we are a marketing platform eventually, and if we get local scale on users, then we'll have supply scale, and then we'll have more demand, and then we'll have more supply, right? So it just gets built around that. And as a result of it, we look at our business as aggregation of some 5,000 small neighborhood, 2-kilometer radius neighborhoods across the country. And what we say is that as the density on these neighborhoods keep going up, we'll make more and more margin. And the thrust, though, at all times, is that we increase the density and we keep making sure that our pricing is such that it keeps making more money as we keep getting denser. I think over the years, we've fine-tuned this model. It works well. Now let me go to what I thought you asked. I thought you asked कि छोटे में चल जाता है फिर जब scale होता है, right? Like तब नहीं चलता. I think that's a very different point because, and it hits you again and again because it's when it's small, the complexity is lower and you can get the whole thing to work. The challenge comes in, we are all here to drive growth. Economics is a hygiene, right? That's what it is. There's no point in building a high margin business which is small. That's not the purpose of the capital that we place. We need to grow, right? So now, how do we take these risks such that we grow the whatever that unit is, right? But we continue to have the economics of that work. And now we've tried multiple things. I'll tell you what we've tried more recently. And this is a moving target. There's no one perfect answer that keeps working for a long time. I gave you this framework of locality. It works beautifully. Now, we need to acquire more and more users acquiring more and more users in a dense locality is still straightforward. But if I want to make a lot of localities dense in a short period, that's really tough because my CAC just shoots through the roof. Now, we know some methods like referral, or we can give, first user 90% off and stuff like that. Those work like a charm. But I would go to what Angad is saying, that charm is deceptive. You don't know, like, it's our country. You put 5 rupees on the table, someone will come and find a way to take it, right? So how do you make sure that you're not being taken for a ride as you run all of these experiments? And these are long lead time. We'll look at cohorts, but cohorts are going to take time to start to show what are the lead indicators. So it's a constant iterative process. And that is the role. That's what we've signed up for, right? To say we will manage growth and we'll manage growth without losing a grip on the economics. And I think while the frame is there, it continues to be something that we look to iterate and get better on as we grow.
Very interesting. And as I look back at the journey of Magic Pin, I can almost like it's flashing in my head 3 or 4 moments where this question has come up, and you all as a team have been quite steadfast on this high frequency iterativeness, right? And then belief in this data and not getting, I think, just trying to shed the biases, if I could say that in another way. Interesting. I was expecting the 3 of you with all your experience and diversity of businesses, quite a few interesting nuggets. I want to pick maybe something more tactical, like thinking about the same problem. You're scaling the business, you're growing, and you're still keeping an eye on unit economics. So tactically speaking, it could be strategy, it could be ops, it could be cash on the balance sheet, or how much you spend, how much you make, I don't know. And then there is the most important element, people, right? If you think, and there could be others, but let's just say these 4, right? Strategy, and I'm sure you've been a consultant before, so I'm sure if you get down to solving problems strategically, I know you come up with very brilliant and smart answers. So strategy, people, cash, operations. What takes, and this is where I know 3 of you are not just co-founders, you're also CEOs of your respective businesses. So when you put your CEO hat, which one of these, as you've been growing your business, which one of these has been the easiest to handle, but which one of these is also has taken a lot of your mind share and has been a challenge, if you may? Sorry for the long question. Happy to repeat it if you want.
Yeah. So I'll go first, Manish. So when I look back at City Mall's journey and my own journey as sort of the captain of the ship, so different aspects of the 4 that you mentioned have taken the driver's seat at different points. Like when we had just started out, honestly, I wasn't thinking strategy. I was just thinking sort of operations and how to sort of get the cash in, and survival was like the most important objective function for me. And as we sort of moved further in our journeys, everyone used to say that hiring is super difficult, and when you just start you don't realize how difficult hiring is. Like hire to ho jate log. But as we have scaled, I've realized that it is oftentimes the rate limiting step in your business, on how well you can hire, how quickly you can hire, and bring all the agility there. So for me personally, it's been different aspects have taken the driver's seat at different points. Something that that sort of has been relatively easier, I won't say easiest, but relatively easier, has been operations and also strategy. And I would sort of break strategy into very actionable elements.
Angad, come on, I thought you would say cash. You've been raising cash at amazing velocity. You've been setting records. I'm just joking.
Yeah. So strategy. It was like what is the direction and pace at which you want to run in which and at which you want to run your company in. And I sort of kept strategies super simple there. So that's been easiest. Something that's been relatively difficult has been cash fundraising. but given the macros, I think it worked in our favor last year. So that's broadly how it was for us. Yeah.
One of the messages Rajan had was, if you raise cash, just keep it handy and keep it dear to you. And I said, I've heard a term recently called husband your cash. So yeah, husband or wife your cash, hold it dearly. Very interesting. Who wants to go next? I'm sure both of you have opinions on this as well, Anshu and Mohit.
Sure. I can go next. Yeah, I would agree with Angad that it keeps changing. But I would say in general order, like you don't revisit strategy every day, Manish, right? Like you think through it, then it's done, right? You don't need to keep coming back to it. Otherwise, there are more fundamental issues. So that part gets taken care of. And cash, I would say, is just operating discipline to that extent, right? Like, once you've got a strategy, you've got cash burn as part of that plan to say, okay, this is the direction we go towards. I'd just say thus that the org design and the capabilities that we are building as a result of that org design, right? I think that is core. And I would say we've oftentimes been too aggressive in the number of things that we can do, right? Just out of ambition. And you can, when you're thinking strategy, you can think everything. And you get down to doing it, you realize that you'll thin yourself out. We can't do everything well. So that piece of saying this is how the org will get built over a period, and hiring matters there, right? And we keep getting better at what we are doing. Some pieces can be left to autopilot, but if you leave things for autopilot for a long, they degrade also. So just making sure that the right capabilities are being built to make sure that the strategy can be delivered. I think that's an important part. Now, this is too abstract still, right? I'll tell you what I really like when it comes to nuts and bolts. I think about the three parts to our business. There is demand generation, which is the brand awareness, recall, trial. The second part is supply. We need all local retailers to be on the platform. And the third part is experience. That needs to be a good experience every time someone tries it. This third part, experience, or consumer centricity, if you were to call it that, right? This is what I worry most about, because very easy to say, really hard to do, over and over, like just getting everyone to realize. And we are a B2C brand, right? We can use our product. So people can have a point of view. They should have a point of view across ranks and files, right? Business owners, ops, right? How does everyone think like the consumer? I would say that to me remains the most important piece that we are yet to overcome, in a way that I look at the experience and I feel every time that, okay, we've delivered, we've like dotted all the I's, crossed the T's. And I think that I would say is the most important piece, finally, when it comes down to what I worry about that we need to get better on.
Actually, Mohit, go ahead. I will pick up a question from the audience after Mohit. We hear Mohit's response in this.
Okay. So, I try to keep it very simple, Manish. Strategy is something very, very fundamental. I know Ansu also said the same thing. You don't do it every day. So one other thing I know is that I want to build a business which is valuable to a large base of customer. And second thing is differentiated, from day one. You want to build a monopolistic business. I don't want to say that word, but you want to build that business that nobody else is building, actually. And that's also very valuable, to build something that nobody else is building, actually. So strategy was very simple. Whatever you do has to be applicable to a large audience for us, right? It has to work for us in every market that we operate in, for example, and it has to fundamentally differentiate us from the competition. On the execution side, right, on operation side, and that's my favorite, actually, that's where my most mindshare would go. The thumb rule has been just set a very few goals, very, very few goals. Right? I'm not a big fan of looking at those 50 metrics. I'm going to look at like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, gather the data daily and then review weekly to guide decisions. So keep it very simple, from a huddle to a weekly review and so on and so forth, right? And therefore you start building the rhythm of a huddle or a weekly review or a monthly strategy and so on and so forth, right? And for the cash, very simple rule, don't run out of it. And I also try and pay attention to every large decision that might impact my future cash flow, but nothing more than that, actually. And that takes the least amount of time, except for the fundraise days, actually, when you get involved with it. But people part, I think, is a fundamental to every business. The time you spend hiring, building capabilities, growing your people will always be a big priority. But today, if you ask me, just for now, I think the challenge or the most mindshare would be on the execution or the operation side. And while on a strategy, for example, nothing really changes, my biggest challenge would have been, how do I get everybody to drive the one element of the strategy which is the most important? You might have 3 or 4 things, 3 or 4 pieces of your flywheel, but which is the one you want to really feed today? Which is the one you really want to focus on, get everybody aligned on? So what is that one metrics you try and move in this quarter or next 2 quarters? I think that's sort of what we have been trying to juggle.
And is that Mohit, is that something that's central to all of Chalo, or this one key North Star metric could be different for a city ops team, could be different for...
No, it's so first you put a North Star for the Chalo itself, right? And then you said, if everybody in Chalo can move that, nothing like it, right? You're done. But if you can't for some reason, then you say, okay, fine, 70% of the company will still drive it. What is the North Star if at least the majority of the company is not really driving it? If that's North Star, then everybody should be driving it actually.
No, fair enough. And actually, I want to pick up a question from the audience, but I'll come to it in a second, because Mohit, you touched on something which I was hoping to ask all 3 of you. And again, I've seen, Anshu, you've, through ups and downs, you've hired and retained some really amazing team members. And I'm talking beyond co-founders. Of course, you and Bridge have been great, and then you hired an excellent team, and you've retained almost all of it. Mohit, you carried a lot of fans and co-founders from Carvale, your successful experience before, and you've also added to the team. And Angad, yours, again, story has been very unique and the amazing growth, yet keeping an eye on unit economics. And again, on the team front, I know personally that you've grown on that vector considerably in the last year. Question for all 3 of you is, and maybe if we can reflect on it and talk about how do you develop this leadership muscle? How do you really develop? Is it about your own self-leadership? Is it like discovering that, bettering it? Or is it that plus some magic formula you have around just developing the organization's leadership muscle? And put it in the context of, again, scale. And scaling sensibly with unit economics, right? Because those are numbers, but ultimately there are people driving interesting parts of the business. So yeah, any magic formula, secret around this area would be good to know.
Manish, I can go first. I can quickly talk about 2 things. One on hiring, and then second, retaining. On hiring, I guess the earlier you are, the tougher it is. But that's where I think it's just got to be that whatever vision you are seeing, if you can get a glimpse of that in the minds of people who you think would be really impactful to the opportunity, they can see it. I think that's great. And the good thing about earlier on is that the energy levels are just very high, right? Everyone is excited. So that part works. When you've got a new vision, like when we were a 2-year-old company, now we're a 6-year-old company, like the newness of it is actually a very big edge, right? You can get people on that. And of course, you've got your story to tell, like the combination of all of that works. The second part, or let me now talk about once you're further along. We are now in that phase and we're trying to get another level of...
Sorry, if I get this right, you're saying once the novelty wears off, it's a harder...
Yeah, it's a different kind of problem. What worked in that first, second year, right, is going to be a different set of things that you need to work at. And I think at this point, what you've got still, I think the ability to say, hey, these are the people who've built it. This is how, I think then what works is having the new person meet everyone else, right, who's been in the system. And we'll have everyone else being able to meet if they've also stayed on in the system, right? So retention thus becomes an important piece. And there I would say, not that I would say we've got that piece down perfectly, but what has worked in general is to make data democratic, right? Everyone should have access. It's not that decisions are being taken from a central place, right? We are together sitting in a room, talking about things intellectually and then taking decisions. I think the second thing that is that while all the people we are likely getting on board are ambitious, when they are very capable people who are ambitious, who are also being challenged and pushed, I genuinely think that's the biggest driver. Is as long as they feel that there is more, right? There is more, and that can continue to not just me calling it out, right? But them seeing that by themselves and us working on frames where we can see, okay, this is the path to go. I think that creates a level of energy and drive, which I would say gets people to stick on. And when we've lost people also, I would say people have contributed immensely. We've usually heard that like a couple of years here felt like 6-7 years out, which is good. You know, honestly, I think that's like people would say that bahut kaam karna, but that's a good thing, right? Like we are all on that mission to say we'll get this done. And people self-select themselves, right? So, and over a period, people who've been here for a long time, right? They would find this Zen-like state, right? That this chaos is what is the value, right? Being able to stay calm within that.
Interesting. And before we move to Mohit and Angad, there is a part of the audience question which links to this. The question is from Aditya Tiwari that as founders, have you had to like reskill yourself along the way? Is it needed? If so, how have you done it? So Anshu, just answer that as well.
I know, absolutely. Absolutely. Like constantly. And I would say like I had been in different macro environments where I'd seen a lot, but like what you need to do on your first day, first week, first month, right? Like you're really like the janitor and the CEO doesn't mean anything, right? You're really doing everything and you better do it, because if you don't do it, then others are not going to do it as well, right? And then what the answer I gave you, right, around building capabilities in the org, that's a different answer, a different skill set, right? Where I find unless we give it sufficient time, be in absorption mode, meet other founders very candidly and in a very receptive way, ask that question that teach me these things, right? I think that's the way. It can be learned. It's just that you have to realize that you likely don't know what needs to be done, and thus be open and keep revisiting and keep asking yourself that question.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Mohit, Angad, who wants to go next?
So, on this question Aditya asked, it's very true that the bottleneck that becomes Manish, and also you said that is in the leadership, is basically inability to grow enough leaders who can delegate and who can predict. And that's where you get stuck, right? People who are not delegating, and founders are also example of that. In fact, to get to 10 employees, founders must delegate activities in which they are weak. So you want to find people who are complementary. Don't you look at that when you're building a founding team, or you're building the first 10 people who are complementary, who can not do things, who can do things which you're not good at. But if you want to get to 50 employees or beyond, you got to delegate function which you are strong. Else, the strength of the founder or the top leader becomes the weakness of the organization. So while there enough is said around hiring and retention, and people can figure out a who method of hiring, which is smart. There's so many things, right? The top grading, etc., etc. And I believe we all have learned those things. But at Chalo, what we did right, I guess, was to spend a lot of time in understanding what kind of people are successful with us today, and then also in the changing times. Maybe there are people who will be with us for 2 years period, right, and help us scale, and then possibly they're not here for a longer term. But can we still
sorry,
have?
I'm stopping you here, but I want to understand this. So you're saying for you, maybe because you come with the successful experience of building Carvale and then taking it to a logical conclusion, you're saying culture was the constant for you, so you knew what kind of people leaders will fit or not fit in that culture.
That's right? Or that's right. Or for the kind of business you're going to build, right? You want to build a very hands-on business, is very different. You want to build a frugal business, it's very different, right? If Chalo is a low margin business, for example, it's not. But then you want to think about it very differently, right? Versus when you think about building a very high margin, pure software business, for example. So that's one, to really know who will fit in here. If you do not know that, if you don't understand your own core values, if you don't understand, what is going to be a great fit here, how do you really go, and get that guy? So I think that's one very fundamental. We spend a lot of time understanding that, and then say, okay, how do we solve for this guy? How do we find that? I've lost the question, actually. I lost the track, but I think this.
In fact, Mohit, if you can answer quickly before Angad chimes in, how have you reskilled yourself, like in major ways in the last, let's say, no, forget Carvale, but Chalo's 5-6 year journey? How have you reskilled
Yeah,
yourself?
a lot actually. Manish, I come from a very, very ordinary background in general. And every time I had a problem, I honestly have gone back and asked a lot of people for advice, and I read a lot every time. For example, when I didn't know how to hire and I was struggling with hiring and how do I interview when I was like a 24-year-old, a founder interview had a VP marketing, right? Who has 20 years of experience, for example. So I would go and read every possible book on hiring and list the top 5 recommended book and say, this is what really, seems good to me. And this is what is going to work, and then put it to practice. I do it for almost everything. If I'm going to build my annual operating plan, for example, I go and refresh whatever people have done. I go back and relook at my own mistakes, and I journal some of these things. I have this habit of reflecting and writing what has worked and what has not worked, what mistakes we made, and so on and so forth. Right? It becomes some kind of data point and so on. So if you ask me the mistake you made in annual operating plan over the last 15 years, I can tell you so many of them. Which of my quarter I failed and why I failed at that, right? So that's one thing. And the second, just the sheer advice, right? I'll come to you and ask you for a few fundamental things, and I'll go to Nitin or Vedehi and ask them, my board members. And they're all very useful actually. So yes, if the company is growing at 30% every month, and therefore 20 or 30x in a year, isn't the founder supposed to grow at least 5x or 10x?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and people have built this. This is nothing new that we are building, right? People have built and said and done all of these things. Like enough resources available. So as long as you can stay aware about it, that I have to grow myself, I think it's easier than
So quickly, Manish, for us, the learning around building the leadership muscle. The biggest learning for me is as much as possible, try to solve it at the top of the funnel. So I think hiring is probably the most value-adding step in the entire sort of people journey, I believe. And when we sort of dwell deeper, we realized, in fact, we asked people in our teams that what would you look for when you are sort of joining a company, and it's actually the framework is very simple. They want to be closer to the problem, or they want to understand what the problem is. They want to know who the peers are going to be. And third is that they want sort of full honesty in terms of what's expected, what's the good and bad about organization. I think mature people, mature professionals know that every organization has some goods and has some bads. And what we do is again very simple, because ours is a very unique business, tier 2, tier 3. It doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. So we take people for visits to places where our community leaders are. These are towns like Rewari, Sonipat, even the rural ones. And people who find a connect with the problem, they become super excited about it.
And this is, you're saying, at the time of top of the funnel, during the hiring process itself.
During the hiring process, yes. And we make sure that everyone is meeting at least 3 people in the leadership team, so they know what's the general sort of who are the people that they're going to work with. And finally, we have a very candid chat. This is how we are. This is what we are. So self-awareness is like a very big part of the entire thing.
Interesting. Have you had to reskill yourself in any major way in the last, let's say, 2-year City Mall journey?
I think multiple in multiple ways, Manish. Starting out City Mall, I was.
I know the end result. I've seen you from pre-series A to series C. You look like a different person every 3 or 4 months. I just don't know how you do it.
I change my haircut. No, but so in multiple ways, so for me, it's simply have a mindset to say that, hey, I am not good at A, B, C, D, and go and ask people about it. And the other thing is, which is like a fundamental belief that if you are if you do something multiple times, you will get it. So that's like
interesting, guys. I knew this would happen. We're maybe like 8-9 minutes away from when I have to call this out, and I'm seeing Q&A has lots of interesting questions. What I'll do is I'll pick a question and I'll direct at one of you. And if you can just be brief in your answer, let's try and cover what we can with this engaged audience. So maybe a question for you, Anshu. when we talk about unit economics, obviously there are assumptions involved, right? Could be LTV in the future or contribution margin or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm adding some words to the question to make it contextual. So how do you make sure your assumptions aren't grossly wrong?
Yeah, we keep comparing the data versus the assumptions. That is a simple way. I think I was alluding to this earlier. Like we are saying this is a CAC, this is the retention or repeat rate, and thus this is the break even, right? Now we can do something to get the CAC down and to scale out the volume, but if the repeat crashes alongside that, the LTV equation is no longer true. And it changes by locality and by type of business. So I would say, yeah, it's fairly, I think those metrics are fairly objective to measure. As I think the mistake which we used to do, and we're trying to change that a lot, but a lot of times these metrics become reporting metrics. That end of the month, end of the quarter, when you're putting together the investor deck, you would then look at it and say, oh, this is how it's looking. I think turning that around to say, and now we're trying to say, get to some of these on a daily basis, right? That this is how this is trending. What are the levers that we pull now to make sure that it stays on course? That discipline, the sooner one can bring in, the better it becomes.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, I'm trying to make sure I direct this to one of you.
Manish, I'll make it easy for you. If you want to take up this question, how you get into the shoes of the customer, then
Yes,
I'll take
please,
it up.
Please, yeah.
I built Carvale.
Of every best customer in Bombay. And
I built Carvale. I was not taking buses, right? And I don't take buses even today, every day. And I think one of the things is to tell yourself that CEO is the dumbest person in the room, right? You don't know enough, because I'm not talking to my conductor every day. I'm not talking to the customer every day. I am not in the field running buses, deploying them, and so on and so forth, right? And not writing a code, all of those things. So one is to literally, talk to that guy as much as you can, the guy who's actually doing it. There are enough people in my city, hundreds of them, who are talking to my end customer every day. As long as I create a system for that information to flow all the time upward, it's great. We all ensure the flow information goes downward, right? That's easy to do, but to make it come up all the time, so your huddles, for example, every day when there's a daily huddle happening, I want to make sure that people say what insight they got from the market today, where they got stuck. I think that gets come up every day. So that's actually, one part of it.
That. You've been doing that for almost 4.5 years. You're right. You do it. Is it a daily huddle? I didn't know
it's a daily huddle for everybody. It's like a 5-minute huddle, but everybody can say, what the number look like today, what their focus is, and what insight they found from a customer, or they're stuck somewhere. Nobody solves it on the call, but you get that, it comes to you, right? So that's one, actually. I think the second thing is, every time there's an opportunity to be in the shoes of the customer, you go and do that. If I visit my city, I make sure I take a bus. I just took a Bombay hop off bus, and we are standing to take that bus. I went and met three conductors that were using my machine, for example. I went and asked 5 customers standing at the bus stop to say, do you use this app? Don't you use that app? And why don't you use it? And if you use it, what you like, what you don't like. And then and there itself, right? When I could go to them and, and speak to them. It's 5 minutes, but we make sure that every time there's a chance, you go and do that. So 2 things I said. One is, because you're not doing it, but somebody else is doing it in your company, you make sure that information flows to you, and you believe you are the dumbest. That guy knows more, so you value it, actually. The second, every time you have a chance, you go ahead and do that. And again, there are customer surveys and agencies, and you do all of those things, right? That's the third bucket, where you say, I'll gather this information more, methodically, systematically, and then you can review it more regularly. But I think I'm talking about a lot more habit, or the mindset that you have for it.
Very interesting. Anga, the question for you, it sort of relates to one of the Q&A here. If you had to pick that one scale vector, I mean, I'm not going to mention, all I can say is that you've scaled massively in every dimension of the business in the last 2 years. But if there was one scale vector you had to pick that has worked well for you, what is that in your business?
Well,
and also, as you think about it, like, did you know this, or this was like discovery as the business is, just growing in every direction?
Yeah, so it's clearly been a discovery so far. So whatever I say now is like a work in progress.
Thank you for being honest.
But it's actually a function of how well you understand the physics of your business. I think defining your scale vector it ultimately comes down to understanding the physics behind the business. And what we realize is that the most leading indicator and the most important part of our business is the community leader. She's the person who does multiple things on the platform. So community leader for us is that unique entity where we realize that if we solve for the velocity and quality of getting these community leaders, we solve for 90% of the problems that exist in the business. So we just focused on that, build creating more community leaders, creating better quality community leaders, and that's how we have sort of pinpointed and focused into that one North Star.
For those who don't know in the audience, that's that micro entrepreneur that you're creating. That is an important part of your engagement with the consumer, right? Very interesting. Yes. So how do you increase that count, and how do you increase the quality of that count? You also said. Interesting. Gentlemen, this has been fascinating. I know I can go on for like 6 more hours, and I would still not be satisfied myself, let alone the audience. But let me ask you one last question, which is anything you want to say, each one of you, keeping again the context, the macro in perspective of maybe we will have 1 or 2 tough years of around funding and at least funding support and investor support. We don't know if it is there. It's going to be a year or 2-year long phenomenon. But if that is the context, and then thinking about scale and unit economics, you got to still grow, right? You got to still grow your business. What is that one piece of advice you would give to entrepreneurs? Anyone can go. Angad, since you have the mic, why don't you go first?
So something that we are doing, and what I would say really helps is if sort of funding is sort of further away, be super close to the customer, because that is where so your customer is going to guide you in the right direction with whatever resources you have in terms of cash, etc. So being sort of super close to the end customer is what I would say. Just sort of triple down on being very, very close to the end customer and understand the physics of the business better, because this is the time to do it.
Okay. Especially if cash is gonna come. So what you're also implying is that if you're close to the customer, at least your revenue to cost cycle is also better.
Right.
Until balance sheet cash or an equity cash is available.
Yeah. So basically, you just understand your business better and better as you understand the customer better. Okay.
Fair enough. Fair. I know it's easier said than done because we all get busy in growing the business, but very, very important piece of advice. Anshu, you want to go next?
Yeah, Manish, I'd say that what I said earlier, it's a great.
Other than obviously coming up with you've somehow cracked coming up with low cost, high impact, creative campaigns around your brand, and I don't know how you guys come up with that, but other than that.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say that while there is this overcast, etc., that we're talking about, but I genuinely believe it's actually a great opportunity. Like use of technology is at levels like it was never. All sectors, all industries, there is an opportunity. And just even if I go with what Angad was saying, be close to the consumer, like tweak that model. And while capital is hard, Manish, I know that's the theme of the context. I think there is enough capital for people who are solving problems. There would be the capital will also get deployed, and these cycles will come and go. It's a good time to stay close to the consumer and use technology, find ways through which there can be efficiency which could be brought in, whether B2C, B2B. I think as India, we are still in a great phase. While there is this theme of saying that capital will not be available, it's not a bad thing. Build a good business. It's a good time to do that.
Interesting. Mohit, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, so it takes 10, 12 years to build a really large business, right? We all know that. So cycles come and go. You may have started a time with a lot of capital available and you hit the cycle after 3 years. We all have seen that actually. So I think anybody who's really building a business is committing to for 10, 12 years, of their lifetime. So it's just so much more important that you solve something fundamental, you solve something which is differentiated, you solve something, what your heart is really close to. So you can live with it for that long a time. And if that's what it is, I think everything else will take care of it, right? You find a great purpose, then no way you'll not find soulmates who also believe in that purpose. And would you not monies fund a company which has a great purpose, got a great team in there, and would you not write a check to solve something which is very fundamental, actually, right? So I think it's very basics, right? So
fair, and so that kind of a guiding philosophy will help you ride through cycles, and you ride for that kind of belief, missionary founders, as we call it. You'll always find good investors. Mohit, I'd like to believe we are one of them, but there are
you are, in fact. So
there's a lot.
You backed us. That's right. Yeah.
Gentlemen, it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for all the great anecdotes, advice, and sharing your experience. And good luck. You all are building fantastic businesses.
Yeah,
I know that. And
for all the founders and entrepreneurs who might be on this audience, right? You should chase money and get his money, right? You will not find a more friendlier or entrepreneurial friendlier VC than him, actually. I can vouch for it, and I'm sure.
I can second that for sure. Absolutely.
Mohit, the check is on its way to you.
And Manish, thank you for making us look smart. At least I can talk about that. Thank you.
You three are too kind. I know that. I know that personally from my experience. In fact, founders do chase these guys. They're building something real, something tangible, something scalable, and building it smartly. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for making it special at RevItUp. Take care. Just a request to the audience to hang in there. I have to anchor the next session as well before I hand it over to my colleagues at WaterBridge. We're waiting for Rahul. I think Rahul dialed in, and then he dropped off. He's going to come back hopefully very soon. So just hang in there. This is a session with Rahul Roy Chaudhary, who's the head of product management at Grammarly. And he's dialing in very early from California.
Hey, Manish.
Oh, good morning to you.
Good morning. I'm sorry, did I crash your other session?
You didn't. I think we were running late. We had a 5-minute buffer, but we had 3 founders who were building all sort of mid-stage, growth stage startups, awesome. And they're celebrities in their own right. So the audience had tons of questions. You didn't crash that party. In fact, I was hoping you will dial in early, but here we are. The audience is live. This Zoom link is live. Sessions are sort of running a little bit behind. So Rahul, welcome again. Thank you so much for doing this, for add wings to RevItUp at WaterBridge Summit in 2022. We know
Love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I know it's very early for you. I having known you for more than a few years.
I've got my coffee. I'm all good.
Yes, you have your coffee. Wonderful. Coffee in a special month. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Rahul, good to have you here. What I'll do is maybe look some of the audience. So most of the audience here is entrepreneurs from India. Wannabe entrepreneurs, already entrepreneurs. There is an odd investor here or there. People like us aren't really building anything real. And here I have you as a guest who's always built something as far as I can remember. So it's interesting to have you here. But for the benefit of the audience, I'll very quickly mention, look, if I had to summarize Rahul's background, he's just been somebody who's been around product management, product marketing. He's built real products. He's built products that have really operated at scale, in every dimension, globally, geographically speaking, and platform speaking, and so on. And he's also stuck to what he's liked for a long time, which I know is rare these days. People switch too often. So the couple of things I'll mention is, of course, Chrome is something that Rahul is a celebrity around that. He started, I guess, very early when Chrome was still
before it had launched.
Before it was launched. So it wasn't even like 1 million customers. I don't know, until the time you hung your boots on Chrome,
several billion.
At least a couple of billion, right? Several billion. Excellent. So that is some sort of a scale which is hard to match. And you saw that journey across platforms as well, and across geographies. Of course, it's a global product. To now building Grammarly, which I'll be surprised if anybody in the audience doesn't know what Grammarly is. But it's at a different scale. You're now building it, to hopefully a Chrome kind of a scale. But it's a different problem that you're cracking as well. So that's the background Rahul comes with. That's the lens he comes with. Rahul, you are a champion for scalable product management. I know you also talk about this. You write about this a lot. The way we had planned this, Rahul, maybe you want to share some quick thoughts?
I have some slides, but I don't have to share it. So I'm happy to just go with the flow. If you want to just intro and then just have questions, totally cool.
It's actually okay. Look, it's a very deep subject. And I know, founders do struggle. Founding teams struggle around product management thinking early on. If you don't do it right, you could just, that could be the death knell in your business. So why don't we cover some of your slides, maybe for the first 10 odd minutes. I know there's a lot from your experience, if it'll be easy or not to crystallize.
No, I can do it. I can do it quickly. No worries. If there's any particular thing I say that's interesting, feel free to just like pick on it and we can expand in the Q&A.
Perfect. Rahul, so why don't you share some of these slides, and maybe in about 10, 12 minutes, I'll jump in, and then there are questions I have, and then I'm sure there'll be audience Q&A as well. So we'll delve into that.
Can I share my screen right now, just so you can? I just want to make sure.
Yes.
You see the slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
So can I just leave this view up? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Logistically?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I'll leave this up. I'll go through my slides. You do the intro. I'll go through my slides. I'll stop presenting. Then we can just have Q&A, whatever, I assume there'll be some people in the audience also asking questions.
Yeah, so what we have done, Rahul, is that audience is asking questions both in the chat and the Q&A, and I'm going to keep a watch on that.
Okay,
so
perfect.
After you finish covering some of these slides, I have a few questions. I'll tee off with that, and then I'll keep picking questions from the audience. You don't have to worry about that. I'll frame the question for you.
I got this. No worries.
Super. I'm turning I think the table is turned to you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Manish, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with everyone. It's early in the morning where I live, but I'm well caffeinated, and so I'm ready to go. So maybe what I'll do is in the first few minutes, let me tell you a little bit about myself and the background I have and the context I'm bringing to this conversation, just so you understand kind of how to contextualize what I'm talking about. I currently run product at a company called Grammarly. I spent many years at Google. I spent many of those years leading the Chrome and Chrome OS teams. And then later in my Google career, I led a cross-company team to focus on user trust. This includes things like privacy, security, safety. During my time at Google Chrome, we really scaled the product from nothing to a few 100 million monthly active users in 2011, which is a long time ago, to several billion users. Now, this graph is a bit misleading. It's very smoothed out. It's not always smooth and up and to the right. There's many bumps along the way that in the interest of aesthetics, we have not shown here. But it was very gratifying to be operating a product at that scale, having that much of an impact around the world. Grammarly, where I just recently moved just about a year ago, in fact, it's going to be my 1-year anniversary next week.
Oh,
congratulations. Is at a different scale.
Congratulations in advance.
Thank you. Different scale, but I'm super optimistic that we can actually operate at a very large scale as we build out the Grammarly product over the next several years. Grammarly, just very basically, is an AI-powered writing assistant. It helps you communicate more effectively and efficiently, something that's even more important now in a world of remote first and hybrid globalized work in a way that probably wasn't as true several years ago. So what I'm going to do for the next lightning round of 5 minutes is I'm going to distill down 25 years of hard-won, blood, sweat, and tear learned lessons in product management. I'm going to distill it down for you all so you can learn from my mistakes and the things that I have kind of experienced over the years. And I'm going to do it very briefly, and then I'm happy to discuss in more detail any one of these things in the Q&A time. Okay, so lesson number 1, measure what matters to your users. Now, this seems like a very obvious thing, but the way I would frame this is we as product managers are faced with a very noisy environment. There's a bunch of inputs coming in, there's business considerations, there's user feedback, there's competitive pressure, market dynamics. And so what ends up happening is it's a very human tendency to measure what's in front of you instead of actually measuring what matters. And I'll give you a very simple example of where I learned this lesson the hard way, which is we worked on this feature called Chrome autofill. You all may be familiar with this feature. You see a form on the web and Chrome autofills this feature. Now, the way we measured quality of this feature was we would look at the accuracy rates in every field on this form. So like, okay, did we fill in the first name field correctly, last name field correctly, etc. And our quality metrics look pretty good. They're like, oh, we're doing great. This feature is awesome. Except users would keep complaining about the feature and we couldn't understand it. We're like, look, it's just good. Our metrics tell us this feature is good, yet users are complaining about it. What gives? And one enterprising young product manager on our team figured out the problem. The problem we figured out was what really matters to users is peace of mind. And peace of mind implies getting everything right. So I don't have to go back and change anything manually. If I get even one thing wrong, any field wrong, I lose that peace of mind because I'm like, okay, hey Chrome, you got this wrong. What else did you get wrong in my form? I got to go check everything. So then the metric becomes, what percentage of the time do we get everything right? And when first of all, we realized we don't even measure that. So we didn't have a way to measure it. So we had to instrument the code to measure that. Once we measured it, it was pretty sobering. And I'll give you a thought exercise. If we are 90% correct on every field and there are 10 fields, the correctness rate, assuming independence, is 0.9 to the 10th power. It's a shockingly small number. So we learned the hard way what to measure. We got that measurement right, and then the quality of the feature improved substantially since then. So if you all are happy users of Chrome autofill, this is the reason that it happened. Lesson number 2. Understand your users' worlds. And what I mean by that is we all have implicit assumptions that we have baked in about how our product is being used in the wild by our users. But the reality is that context always changes. It changes either because our users' context is changing. Just think about all the disruptions caused by remote first work, people using the product and working in different ways. It also changes because we have new types of users coming in and using our product in ways that, in environments where we never anticipated it was going to be used. And it's really important to keep tabs on how our product is being used by different kinds of users and really have your pulse on what's happening there because it keeps changing. The way I learned this lesson, through experience is Chrome was already, this is about a decade ago, Chrome was already quite successful. I was running the team there. And this was when smartphone adoption was taking off in many parts of the world, including India. And we sort of just assumed that things were fine. Like we had a product, it was working well. There's a bunch of new users coming online in India. That's great. Like, let's celebrate that. However, our usage stats in India weren't looking that great. Like, the engagement was lower. Our share was lower, the other problems. And it took some folks on our team to really recognize that, let's understand how our product is being used in India. Like what's happening there? Like, is the context different? Is it the same? Like, let's understand what's going on. That deep dive really was eye-opening for us. For one thing, many devices on which Chrome was being used were entry-level Android devices, less memory footprint, less on-device storage, and Chrome just didn't perform well in those environments. I mean, we just assumed that there was unlimited memory and unlimited storage and all this stuff was just there. That was not the case. And so we just had baked that into our assumption. Another really interesting data point was, I still remember this, we were in a user's house doing a situational user research study, and we asked them to do a task, and we said, okay, why don't you open up Chrome and do something? So they open up Chrome, and they see this blank page with a box in it, and that was the design. You search for what you want on the web, and this person opened it up and saw this box, and they were just kind of puzzled by it. They're like, what is this thing? What they were telling the researcher was, oh, it looks like Chrome isn't working. I just see this box. I think let me kill it and start it again. At which point I was like, oh my God, this is such a disaster, because that's exactly the intended UI. And another implicit assumption we had baked in was everyone knew how to search on the web. Everyone already used computing in some capacity, and Chrome on a mobile device was just kind of an additional computing device. None of those assumptions were true in this new environment. And we learned that lesson the hard way. And we had to do a lot of things to change how the product operated to get that product to work well for these users in these new environments. So understand your user's context. It changes more often than you think. All right, lesson number 3, understand your users' pivotal journeys. Now, many of us understand how to think about user journeys. We talk about hero use cases, and there's a lot of literature on how to make sure that those hero use cases are optimized. This is not that. That's important. This pivotal journeys are something different. I just made up this term, by the way. I don't know if that's that term of art, but what I mean by this is these are things that users don't do very often in your product, but when they do it, it's really, really important to get it right. So think about situations in which you lose access to your account, or there's a payment decline, your credit card is expired, your password you can't access your password. These are the exception cases, but when it happens, the way you show up as a product can literally make the difference between a lifelong customer and churn. And so really, it's important to understand your users' pivotal journeys and show up in those moments and make sure you get it right. Now, during the beginning of the pandemic, one of the teams I was responsible for at Google before I left was the Google account team. It's a very widely used product. There's lots of Google accounts out there. And people have these challenges with their Google accounts. They get locked out, there's other problems, and there's a lot of valuable information in that account. So it's difficult for people. So we have a support team that manages if a user gets locked out, they can call the support team. Now, at the beginning of the pandemic, for a variety of reasons, we lost some of that support capacity. And so to fill that capacity, a bunch of really helpful engineers and product managers from our team said, you know what, we'll step up and we will provide support so our users don't suffer. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to see that. As they were doing the support, what they realized was, wow, this process is pretty clunky. It's not good for the support team. It's not good for users. There's too much back and forth. There's too much duplicated information. Let's make it better. And they did. And it's so much, the support process is so much better now. It's a wonderful thing that helps millions of people every single day. Now, why did it take PMs and engineers getting involved in the support process for this to get better? It's because many of us, I think, are pre-wired or preconditioned to think of these pivotal journeys as exceptions, as something for customer support to handle, for ops to handle. But I would encourage us all to think about, how do we make sure the product understands what's happening to our users at these moments, and make sure that we can help have the product show up in the right way with empathy for what the user is going through. It really is important. Lesson number 3. Lesson number 4, deliver moments of joy to your users. Now, look, I'm a user of many software products. We're not robots. We're not automatons. We're human beings. We have busy lives. We're stressed. We're doing a bunch of stuff. And so if your product can deliver just unexpected moment of joy, fulfillment, happiness, emotional connection, that is just a wonderful part of the overall product experience. When Chrome, in the early days of Chrome, we had this offline error page. So when you couldn't connect to the internet, we would just show this error page. And we had this dyno, the Chrome dyno, just as an image on that page. And one day, I still remember this meeting. There was a product designer at this meeting saying, hey, this is kind of a crappy moment. This person was trying to connect to something and they couldn't. They failed in their task. So why don't we turn that moment of sadness into a moment of joy? And here's my idea. I'm going to show you this idea I have for this game, interactive dyno game. And we built it. It was awesome. And that thing, so first of all, it was just a wonderful thing. It was probably one of the most widely played games in the world. I think probably there's some lost productivity that I might be responsible for there. But really, from that moment on, every time I talk to any group of people about Chrome, like I talk at my kids' school about, like, hey, I work on Chrome. The first thing they would say to me was, oh, dyno game, I love it. It's so awesome. And so that created that moment of emotional connection with the product. And I think actually that's the thing that people remember way more than a bunch of other features that you're launching. At Grammarly, we have this weekly email we send out. Some of you may get this, where we just celebrate your progress in communication. Like, hey, you did great last week. You wrote these many words. You're doing awesome. You progressed from a year ago, and we're just kind of celebrating you in your journey. And these moments are really important because just recognize that your users need that emotional connection to your product. So think about how you can deliver these moments of joy. Okay, lesson number 5, and that's the end, is earn and strengthen your users' trust. And what I would say here, just kind of as kind of a framing, is technology is now more pervasive than ever before. It's in every aspect of our lives in ways that even I, as a technologist, could not have fathomed a decade ago. Like just the other day, I was trying to grant access to my vacuum cleaner, from my smartphone through an app. They're going to connect accounts. Craziness. Like what? Like, do I grant access? What data is being collected? Where's the data going? I have no way to reason about what is happening, how data is being joined together. And I'm pretty tech savvy. And so just recognize that we have foisted as technologists. I'm a huge fan of technology. I'm a technology optimist, but we should all recognize that the pace of change that technology has driven in people's lives is very, very fast. It's faster than people's capacity to absorb that change. So it's on us. It's our responsibility to do it in a way that strengthens user trust, not erodes it. There's a very nice user trust equation created by this professor from the Harvard Business School. Manish, you and I went to Stanford Business School, so this might be.
I was just gonna say. I mean, I'm kidding. I wasn't gonna say anything.
So let's just set that aside. Let's set that aside. But the simple way to think about it is there are 3 things that help trust. Credibility, which is how competent are you? Like, it's all very well to have virtue signaling statements, but are you actually competent? That's what credibility is. Reliability is, do you have a brand promise? And can you reliably follow through on that brand promise? If your brand promise is we have the best quality, can you reliably deliver on that brand promise? If your brand promise is best customer service, fastest, whatever it might be, make sure that people can count on you to deliver on that thing. Intimacy is about emotional connection. It's not just about keeping people safe. It's about make people feeling that they're safe when they're using your product. And can you create that sense of intimacy and safety? And then what erodes trust is the degree to which your incentives deviate from your users' incentives. It doesn't always align 100%. Just recognize that reality of your business model and your users' incentives, and just recognize that any deviation is going to result in an erosion of user trust. And just be very cognizant of it, engage in the conversation with your users, and bake that into how you build your product. So that's it. Measure what matters, understand user context, understand pivotal journeys, moments of joy. We're not robots, and user trust is super important. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and happy to answer questions or get any feedback.
This is incredible, Rahul. I mean, I can relate to this just because I know you for a while and have tracked your career decisions. This is really, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 years of learnings crystallized in really 5 or 7 minutes. We could frankly just go on each one of those slides, and there could be an hour-long or 2-hour-long active discussion. But no, thank you so much for sharing it so succinctly and effectively. In fact, oh, by the way, on the Harvard Business School, I was just going to say that they've had their share of glory here or there, as we've had ours. But I'm actually personally also a fan of this trust framework. I have read a little bit about it. You actually put it into action in Chrome and other products you've been part of. It's great. It's great that you quoted that. Rahul, if it's okay, I'm gonna I'm gonna just dive into maybe some themes that come out of these 5 very simple sounding but very deep lessons.
Yeah.
And then some from your own journey. And I'm also trying to link it back to the theme for the summit, which is RevItUp. That's around building value in products, effectively building value in businesses, not valuations. Those cycles come and go, as we know. And also as product managers think about building their own, how do they scale their own dimensions as a product that's serving maybe 100,000 users to something that may serve 50 million, 100 million, or if they're lucky, something like 1 billion or many billions like you've been a part of. So with that in mind, I'll actually just ask straight away first, when you look at product management, what comes to your mind first? Is it more of an art? Is it more of a science?
Yeah, I think, so first of all, I'll say the essence of product management to me, people are like, what is a product manager? It's lots of definitions. My view is the essence of product management is you put the user in the middle and you deeply understand user needs. It's that simple. Like, it's easy to get caught up in a lot of complexity around like, what is the competitor landscape? What are other people doing? How do I survive in this world? Like, what is the business model, etc. But ultimately, you've really got to be super, super clear as a product manager, what problem you are solving for users. You got to make sure it's a problem the users care about. You can solve a problem that they don't care about, and that's not going to work out well. So you got to make sure you're solving a problem they care about. And so I think it's art and science. So like user centricity is the key thing. And user centricity is one of those things where it seems like an obvious thing, like, of course, user centricity, but in my experience, often we can deviate from it because we get caught up in all sorts of other considerations. And like really keeping that framework of like, is it the right thing for the user is a very simple framework to always remind yourself to simplify decision-making. There's science and art. I think there's science in the sense that, look, there are well-defined processes we should follow. Like we should understand, product health metrics. We should have a way of collecting feedback, aggregating feedback. And so there's science to understanding how is the product doing? What are we measuring in the product? What is the process of value creation? But it's not just science, it is art. At the end of the day, I think what the key to success is you're solving an important problem that users care about. That's one piece of it. And second piece of it is you have some unique differentiated way that is not easy to copy in delivering that solution. So that you build something, it's solving the problem, that's awesome. But you know what? There's really no kind of moat or differentiation or core capability that you bring that just can't be easily replicated elsewhere. And so then that success is very tenuous, could change at any time. And so the first question is, what is the problem we're solving? The second question is, why should we be the ones solving it? What is the thing that we bring to the table? And you got to be very honest about it. Like this can't be, these are moments of sometimes scary recognition of our own capabilities and what we do well and what we don't do well. And it's important to be super honest about what we can and cannot do.
Amazing. So it's a combination of both.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as scale product management teams are built, as a leader, you would have to think about bringing both kinds of skills and thinking to the table. Very interesting. I want to actually talk about the Dino game. In fact, it was one of my my older daughter who you have met. She pointed me to the Dino game, and it certainly brought tons of joy to many Chrome users. If I dare say, it's been used more than games that consumers have otherwise paid hundreds of dollars for, or even more. So clearly a very interesting idea. But look, we've got the benefit of hindsight there. The question that keeping the Dino game and that concept of bringing joy to users at the core of it, as a product management lead, I mean, you must be getting hundreds of ideas. I mean, go back to your time at Chrome. How do you, I mean, you can't iterate, you can't do A/B testing on everything. You can't, accept everything. There's almost like a venture capital or whatever the model is of top of the funnel to then, selecting some ideas. How do you select what to experiment with and what to reject?
So there are a couple of things. One is, at Chrome, by the time I left, was a very large team. And so there's many teams globally distributed, et cetera. And so as you scale up, you want to make sure that people feel a lot of autonomy. I was in the position of leading the team. And so we hired very smart people in. And so the last thing you want to do is hire smart people in and then just kind of be super prescriptive on everything they should be working on. So one thing that I try to do as a leader is to just have us point in the same direction. Let's all agree on the biggest problems that we want to solve as an overall team for the next 12 to 18 months. And then everyone can kind of figure out, like, what are they going to contribute to solving that problem? So a good example is, all right, so Chrome, as I mentioned, Chrome did not work well in the early days on these entry-level mobile devices. We need to solve that problem. Why is that problem important? We kind of did the analysis to say, look, this is a massively fast-growing environment. We expect a couple of years from now, billions of people will be using Chrome on these devices. We got to fix it. Now, this is not just any one team fixing it. Everyone needs to jump in and to contribute, from how the memory management team, from the UI team, dealing with, like, okay, how do we deal with the blank search box, et cetera. So we kind of agree on the problem, and then every team goes and solves what they can to make progress on that problem statement. And my role there is just to encourage people, to unblock them, but not to sit there and bug people on, like, do this thing and don't do this other thing. That's part of it. The other part of it, to be honest, is there's a certain amount of creativity and cool ideas, and you want to just build in some place in your org for just sort of unconstrained innovation to take place. Everyone has different things. In Chrome, we used to do hack weeks every so often. People would just come together, a couple of weeks, just come up with cool ideas. We'd have contests, just make it fun. At Grammarly, there was a similar thing in place already before I joined, which is great. I think you need some innovation outlet. And when you see good ideas, just say yes. Don't get in the way. Just let that innovation flourish.
Very interesting.
That's the case of the Dino game. I can take zero credit for it. But someone came up with a really cool idea, and I just did not get in the way. That's the extent of my.
But it clicked for you in that very instant.
Yeah.
It did. Interesting.
Yeah.
Let's stick to Chrome for another minute or two. Clearly, again, with hindsight, one can, like you said, the smoothing of the curve that you showed earlier in your presentation. Life is never as smooth as sometimes pictures and graphs show us.
Yeah.
What are, like, one or two, could be challenging or could be on the upside kind of pivotal moments? And I'm sure there are many, but if you had to pick the top two in what has made or helped Chrome become what it has become, dominant market leader, what would those be, Rahul? Just walk us through that.
Yeah. The source of all my gray hair. One of them is the rise of mobile. So even before Android, entry-level Android devices, etc., smartphones were taking off in the US or globally with the launch of the iPhone. Chrome at that point had already been quite a successful desktop product. We had got a big share of desktop browser market. And when mobile came, in retrospect, the way we saw mobile was, it's just an operating system port. Essentially the way, I'm oversimplifying it, but the way I think we took it was to say, all right, we've got Chrome on Mac and Windows. I guess now we need to build Chrome for iOS and Android. We'll just do it. Just like you do Mac and Windows, we'll just build Chrome for new operating systems. I think we failed to understand the fact that mobile was a fundamentally different computing model and computing paradigm. And it took us a while to really understand that. So that was an existential moment where the mobile web was really struggling. There was a very famous Mark Zuckerberg moment, which many of you may not remember. It happened a long time ago, where he basically said, I'm done with the mobile web. I'm all in on apps. And so I was in the Chrome team at the time saying, oh my God, what is happening? So we really struggled with that. We couldn't understand what was wrong on mobile. It really took a lot of humility and took a lot of we had to really go back and rethink the experience from the ground up to make it work on mobile. And there's many interesting stories about how we did it, but it took us a while to get that right. So I would say that was kind of a big moment of truth for us. And we almost never made it out the other end. And then another interesting moment, this is a little more sensitive, so I'll be careful what I say here, but with more recently, when Windows started investing a lot more, Microsoft started investing a lot more in the mobile web, there was definitely some challenges with, we had a bunch of users on Windows. Microsoft had just launched a new browser called Edge. And they were doing these flows that made it hard for Chrome users. They would get an operating system update, and suddenly Edge would become their default browser, and they'd be like, what just happened? I used to use Chrome and now I'm using Edge. And so all these shenanigans were happening, and that was challenging. And I think, there was a lot of discussions about like, how do we respond to this? And actually, honestly, I remember being in these very complicated meetings, lots of game theory happening. We do this, Microsoft does this. It really comes down to what is the right thing for the user. We're dealing with mind-numbingly complex trade-offs. And the way I made decisions there was, let's just make sure that the user experience is great. And let's not worry about, we don't want users to be dealing with Google and Microsoft doing some strategic face-off like that. Users should not be caught in the middle of that thing. And that really helped guide me through it. And we came out the other end. I think we're doing pretty well. My information's a bit dated now, but I think it's doing pretty well.
But it's still easier said than done, right? I mean, as you said, these are fairly complicated, multi-dimensional problems, especially when it's competitive behavior of another behemoth against yours.
Yeah.
And as startup founders think about it, they have to actually think about the 800-pound gorilla's moves, that could potentially kill their product or the need for it, and so on. So interesting. Keep the user at the core and center of it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the answers become obvious and easy. Interesting. I want to stay on one of your other themes. I think it was lesson number 3. But the question related to that is, how do you get personal biases, team biases out of the whole product management journey and experience? Because ultimately it's humans that are in there. So again, it's easy to say, look, I'll listen to the user and make it all work for the user, but the humans on the other end to making decisions. Any nuggets for our audience on how you've managed to keep biases out of this?
Yeah, it's very hard to completely eliminate bias. There's always going to be unconscious bias. And so you just have to be very vigilant. One of the things that really helps is just diverse teams. I'm a big proponent in the US. There's a DEI, many companies do DEI efforts. I'm a big fan of it. Building products that touch a wide variety of users, having a team with the diversity of backgrounds, experiences really helps. And I would encourage everyone in whatever context. Diversity comes in many different forms. And so it could be racial, gender, ethnic. It would also be just life experiences. And so I would just encourage you to make sure that you don't create a monoculture where everyone is a kind of a mirror image of you, and you all come from the same background and have the same experiences, because you're going to be very blind to a lot of things as you scale your product. So that's one thing. I think everyone should be thinking about that. Another one is just be humble. I think be very open to user feedback, really make it a point to understand what users are seeing and what they're saying about your product. if you're not hearing from your users about your product, that also is a problem. Find ways to hear. Like maybe the lesson is, oh yeah, we have no idea what's happening. So let's build in some in-product feedback, and let's make sure we have some channels, and let's make sure we are looking at that feedback. And if you're operating at some scale, sometimes the feedback loop between customer success or customer support, or even social channel managers and product can get a little bit diffuse. Like, there's more product managers, where does the feedback go, etc. And so the product team needs to be laser focused on hearing what's coming from those teams. And, doing it with an open spirit. Like maybe one of the other suggestions I would have is, sometimes people can get a little defensive about these things, I've built this thing, it's perfect, it's my baby, it's like, there's nothing could possibly be wrong with it. And then you hear user feedback and it's not exactly what you expected. That's okay, just be humble. Users ultimately will guide us in the right direction, and we got to be open to it.
Interesting. Super interesting. Cool. I'm also keeping an eye on time as well as some Q&A, and then the team is also getting fed with questions from founders separately. So I want to make sure that I cover at least the breadth of questions that is coming in.
Yeah.
One question which I had also, and this has been asked, is just, I think people are trying to understand your own journey of learning and unlearning. And, since again, one of the conference themes is how do founders scale and, learn along the way of scaling their products and businesses, is that, look, Google, of course, tech giant, Chrome, dominant market share, I don't know, 60, 70%, I don't know, dominant market share, let's just leave it there. Billions of users, and you'd seen the journey from start to that, point of scale, to Grammarly, which is a very interesting product. Off the bat, it's about solving for, it is just a product that empathizes with users day one, right? Somebody who's wants to get better with language and the impact and communication of that language and so on. But it's still at a very different scale. It's, I don't know, tens of millions of users. What kind of unlearning and new learnings are you have gone through in the last year or so as you navigate this next phase in your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I joined Grammarly about a year ago. The reason I joined was the mission of the company really resonated with me. One of the things I've always done in my career is I'm not a founder, so I try to find in places where the problem statement that we're attacking is something that I care deeply about. Like in the early days of Chrome, for example, it was a skunkworks project inside Google, and people thought we were crazy. It was not like one of those things that people said, "Oh, what a great idea." People are like, "What? Well, you guys are nuts." And frankly, they might have been correct. But what I loved was, I loved the idea of making the web platform better. And that mission really resonated with me. And I just took a leap of faith. I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be successful or not, but I would like to bring that future about. I felt the same way about Grammarly. Grammarly is looking to scale, but it's much earlier in its evolution. But the mission really resonates with me. And if I project out 5 to 10 years and I imagine a future world in which billions of people around the world are communicating more effectively with each other, with reduced anxiety, with greater understanding, I feel like that's a world that I want to bring about. And I want to be part of that journey. And so that's why I joined the company, and we're going to embark on that journey. And my sense is, if you get like-minded people with the same sense of shared mission, you kind of have a much better shot at bucking the odds and actually bringing that about. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If enough people believe, it kind of just becomes the truth. So that's the intent at Grammarly. I think, it's an earlier stage company. And so I think the key thing is we just got to pace ourselves. It's a very large opportunity space for us. There's so many different ways in which people communicate. They communicate in different mediums, video and voice, in different languages. And if Grammarly were to just go after the entirety of the opportunity at one fell swoop, just because like it's so exciting, we should do everything, I think it would be difficult from a product strategy perspective to actually build defensible, useful products that solve user needs at every step of the way. So you really want to take a user problem, solve it end to end, be confident that you've nailed it, move on to the next user problem, and slowly expand from a very secure foundation. And so I think one of the things is we're just going to pace ourselves and not try to just spread ourselves too thin, because we're a smaller team. Second is, it's not like I want to just have a one size fits all solution. Like in Chrome, we used to have a certain set of processes because we are a very large global team. At Grammarly, we are global, but we're much smaller. So, like some of the stuff we did that was appropriate for a much larger team is not appropriate here. So you got to just check the process is not the end. The process is just a means to operating with more transparency. So if something is not needed, let's not do it.
Oh, very interesting. And by the way, you quoted in slightly different words, a very famous dialogue from Shah Rukh Khan as well, right? And there's a lot of audience that relates to Bollywood too. So I think that would resonate quite well. Rahul, a question more, I think a question that is being asked is probably their younger product or a younger business. What advice would you have for them in terms of not making critical mistakes early as they're thinking about building a scalable product?
I think, I think it's really important to so let's back up. I think it's really important as product managers to have a very clear sense of what problem you're solving and to be convinced that you actually have an effective way to solve that problem that is differentiated, unique, and is actually solving this problem well. It sounds like a very easy thing, but often, what I find is people build something and they haven't mapped backwards from a user problem. They just build something and then they're like, all right, how do I take this to market? And if you actually map it to a user problem, you find it's not really solving the entire user problem. It's solving a part of the user problem, but users need to plug and play a bunch of other things to solve the problem. And it doesn't kind of fit into how users actually do work, whether it's enterprise or consumer. So the best advice I have is really start with the user, understand the problem, and also be very honest with yourself about how important that problem is. And you just got to recognize that some problems might be nice, but it doesn't matter that much. Like, the best alternative solution, which may not even be a technology solution, is reasonable. It's fine. And so I see a lot of blind alleyways because that discipline doesn't get applied up front. So I would say, as much as possible, front load that process. Don't spring into action without having a very clear sense of the strategy.
Interesting. Rahul, I'm sensitive of time. This is the last question, and I promise to free you up before your busy day starts, and we've had you start very early. This is more, this is coming from me, and I know, look, currently there's just so much going on, right? We live in a fairly volatile world, and I know Grammarly is like also affected by the whole Ukraine situation, right? I think you have some workforce and folks that are working with Grammarly there. We don't know what's going to come out of that. And then, of course, the whole volatility around tech markets, public markets, and whatever effect it has on private markets as well, and so on. What worries you today, like the most, as you think about let's just put Grammarly's context to build something really impactful, sustainable, large scale, sort of like Chrome. What worries you when you go to bed, when you think about that mission on one hand, and then things that you don't control? And how do you sort of get your peace with it also?
We are living this in real time. We have a large team based out of Kyiv, which was our previous hub. The founders came out of Ukraine, even though they don't live there now. And so over the last few months, actually, it's been quite difficult at work because we're trying to help our colleagues who are in harm's way. It's crazy. It's just amazing to see the resilience, but it's also very difficult. Many of our colleagues are in a difficult situation. I think at moments like these test whether you as a company and what you have built will shatter under pressure or come together stronger. And what's been really amazing to me at Grammarly is over the last couple of months, things have been very, very difficult. We've lost a bunch of capacity. We have, just at a personal level, people we care about in harm's way, struggling. And people have just come together. It's truly inspiring to see how everyone has come together to want to help. And it's not based on fear of the unknown or fear of the future. It's based on, I really care about this team. I care about this mission. I care about my teammates. What can I do to help? That, and this, I can't take any credit for this. This is Grammarly's culture that attracted me to the company as well. That to me is the most positive sign of our long-term success, is that we actually didn't shatter under pressure. We became stronger under pressure. I am super focused on the long term. There's challenges. I mean, if I just look at the world around us, there's increased polarization. There's increased kind of, there's a retreat of globalization, if you will. And there seems to be more parochial kind of territorial tendencies. Russian aggression is one thing, but there's many other examples of this. There's also global warming. And so there's just a whole host of just difficult problems in the world that we can't control. I think what we can control is building a culture in which people feel supported and strengthened when they see this pressure around them versus get pulled apart. And if that's our contribution, I think it's a very positive contribution. And I'm super focused on the long term. I think we'll come out of this stronger. I think the tech world will come out of this stronger. And we want to just keep building tech to help people in their daily lives.
That's amazing. Amazing to hear that optimism from you, especially when your teams and the company is quite directly impacted by this, as are many other companies. Rahul, this has been fascinating. I mean, look, for me, it's catching up with you is always great, but to do it in this format, where the focus is on the audience, product managers and product builders, it's great to see all your experience getting crystallized, as I said earlier, in this short 45-minute time frame. Sorry for having very targeted questions, but we wanted to get the most from you in this time. I really hope, I certainly enjoyed it. I hope it was good use of your time, and I hope the audience enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll get you back. Maybe we'll have to pick like 5 separate sessions for each of the lessons that you shared, and that may not be enough.
Sounds good. Hey, listen, Manish, it was great. Really enjoyed being here. Thank you for inviting me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. On behalf of the whole WaterBridge team and the audience, our founder partners, and everybody else, thank you very much for your time. You take care.
Take care.
Have a good day.
See you, everyone.
Thanks
a
lot.
Manish. Bye.
Bye. Okay, I think we have one last session for the day. It's with another interesting speaker, a leader, Kirtika Reddy, who's just actually done it all. So I hope the audience just hangs in there. Kirtika is going to be with us probably in the next 5 to 7 minutes. So hang in there, and we will join you soon. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
All right, we are not yet live, right? I'm just trying to get the, or are we live?
You are live.
Amazing.
I'm
All
so
right.
sorry. You are live. And if there is somebody who can handle being live without knowing they're live, it's you.
Amazing.
So you are live. It's crazy. It's been going well. We started the day with Rajan, and you know Rajan. He can excite an audience. And we just finished a session, Kirtika, with Rahul at Grammarly, and heard all the amazing product management lessons he had to share from his Chrome days.
What were your biggest takeaways from Rajan's session and from Rahul's session? And maybe Anjali can take one and Manish can take one. And
yeah, Anjali, why don't you go first? Pick either one.
Like typical, right? They'll put you on the spot if they want to answer the question. Very typical of Manish.
No, Rajan was brilliant. I think he set the context and he reminded all of us that it might be March, but we're deep into 2022, and did a reality check for founders. As you know, Kritika, the audience is largely early stage founders. So I think the messaging was really get real. I think quote unquote was get real this year, and
in what way?
Cash and make sure that your, as Manish was saying repeatedly, husband your cash or wife your cash or hold your cash near and dear to you this year, and just make sure that you're building real businesses, businesses, and making sure that unit economics are solid. But this year is going to be a tough one to be raising and scaling. Yeah. So multiple reality checks in Rajan's opening keynote for today.
While we were trying to drum it up about RevItUp, he said first get real, and then we can rev it up.
Yeah.
That was Rajan for you, and Rahul. Look, Rahul is got this amazing ability to look. I don't know what, for 13, 14 years at Chrome, and I've met him along the way, right? You know, he was been part of the core team with Sundar, and he crystallized everything in like 5 lessons. But if I was to like really go at the center and the heart of it, it's shed all your biases and shed whatever else we bring to the table as large teams. But yeah, keep the user at the center and at the core of whatever you're designing. That's the North Star metric for product management. So for me, I know we know it, but you know the way he puts it in the context of a few billion users, how the Dino game came about, and how they bring joy and moments of joy for users. It was just very interesting. Good, again, a reality check in a different way. Yeah, that was Rahul for you.
Amazing.
Now it's time for us to put you on the spot a little bit. Kritika, actually I'll have Anjali. You haven't met Anjali before. Anjali is here. Why doesn't Anjali sort of kick this off? But we'll keep passing the ball between us, and we'll keep it informal. Yeah.
Amazing. You know, I was actually just reflecting on what would I want to say if someone asked you this question about my session. And I think I would want you to say, and the audience to take away, and I'm sure we'll dig into all of these aspects, is 1, the power of a big, bold vision. 2, how scale and execution is about having everyone, like in your organization and in your ecosystem, thinking bold, thinking big, thinking scale. It's not just about the leader. And 3, it's about being compassionate to yourself and to all of your partners in this ecosystem. So, but let's dig in.
You've given us a lot of masala. We could like just take those 3 themes and maybe spend like 6 hours on it. But well, maybe actually we will pick some of those later. Anjali, to you.
Yeah. No, good evening and welcome everyone to this wonderful session in day 2 of the WaterBridge RevItUp Summit. Super excited and stoked to have Kritika Reddy with us. And let me take this opportunity to very quickly introduce her and dive right into our session today. Kritika needs really no introduction. She's been there, done that, done it all, I would say. And she's been a tech executive, Facebook's first employee in India. And after being an operator for many years, she's also been an investor, being SoftBank's first female partner. And then she's moved on to continuing to being president at the Athena SPAC. And of course, board member at WeWork. and pair, and now I can add author, if I may. And she has a book that all of us are eagerly looking forward to called The Opportunity Engine. Thank you so much.
Third chapter is due tomorrow, and I'll be doing an all night to actually finish that. So yes, thank you for reminding me.
No, thank you so much for joining us. The audience this evening is largely early stage founders from the Indian startup ecosystem. And straight off the bat, since I have the mic, would love to just firstly ask you, how do you really do it all, keep it all together, and just keep scaling yourself, your skill sets, and keep rolling all the time?
If I may actually add, there must be a private plane waiting somewhere, because if I just follow your LinkedIn, I don't know, I see you in front of NYSE, and then in 24 hours you're in California, Sausalito, or somewhere else. So I'm just adding a little subtext to Anjali's question. Tell us how you manage all of this.
No private jet. If there was one superpower that I wish I would have, it would be that ability to teleport myself to wherever I want to be. I do travel really well. So for me, a flight at any time of the day means nothing. It's just 5 hours of work. So I think that is part of my secret, and not something I recommend, but I do well on low sleep as well, but it's not something that I recommend, and I'm not proud of it. But so let's jump in. So one, just so excited to be here at this year's RevItUp. I have, of course, known Manish from the time this was a concept, and to see that take fruition and to see it going from strength to strength, and Anjali having the ability to have this conversation with you is just incredible. And they are a big example of RevItUp themselves, and what they do for founders, the heart and soul and spirit they put into each conversation, each founder, whether they invest in the founder or not, has truly been phenomenal. And so when Manish asks you to do something and says, could you do this? And I'm sorry, it's at whatever, 6:30 a.m. your time. I'm like, whatever. It does, of course, it's a yes. So delighted to be here. And by the way, again, that's another key lesson, is that investment in people and relationship with both Manish and Anjali represents so well. And an early lesson that I learned in my career, this was at Facebook, where I learned, the first time the Facebook executive team was visiting, I remember putting up we were so excited to talk about all that the business had done. I started my presentation with first talking about the business results, and the executive stopped me. At that time, it was Grady Burnett, who ran all of online sales. And he said, Kirtika, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. I want to first know, how are you hiring the right people, building the right culture? Because if you do both of those and have this big, bold vision in place, business results will come. To me, that was a big aha in terms of how to build a business. And as my dear friend Rajesh Soni says, business models will come and go, but culture is very difficult to change. So it's something that people need to think about from the start. And by the way, I also have many founders say, but that's all like those soft stuff. I'm building my business, I'm scaling, I'm revving it up. I really don't have the time to focus on all of that. But how people show up, how they make decisions, how you handle conflict, all of that is nothing but culture, and you might as well be deliberate about it. So I would say, Anjali, a big part of my journey and the impact I have been able to make is about two things. One, it is a reflection of a poster that you will see in Facebook offices across the globe, which is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? Again, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And some people like to phrase it as, what would you do if you know that you were successful? Just whatever question resonates with you. And the spirit of constant learning and being open to learning from all quarters, whether it's someone senior to you, your peer. I've learned so much from people who are just at the grassroots level in the organization.
No, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I remember anecdotally when I, was drafting my last email out of EY, spending 10 years there, I ended it with, and people kept asking me, what are you doing next? And I said, it's time to do, what I do if I'm not afraid. And that's really how I ended my email.
Amazing.
The other thing I want to, since you spoke about, your presentation at Facebook, just taking off from there, and the 6 years that you spent building Facebook India, from hiring the first teams to even, building the revenue engine and just scaling and growing the team across India and then beyond across Southeast Asia as well. India, the macro as well was at an inflection point. People were just getting onto mobile. But take us through some of those insights, both internally as you were building the team, as well as how the macro was shaping up for you, and some insights that would benefit some of our founders listening.
Amazing. One situation or anecdote that comes to mind as you ask me this question is, someone telling me, oh, can you refer growth marketers to our organization, but I hope it comes from an organization that's not so inherently viral as Facebook, because our organization and our product is not so inherently viral. And I look at them and I say, it's because they have the best growth marketers that the product was that way versus the other way around. So being very deliberate about hiring it was a key aspect. There was a key aspect about in God we trust. For everything else, we look at data, was another key theme. Few other key lessons, like scale was just built into everything that we did. And I could spend hours just talking about different aspects of that. Some aspects that worked really well that I would really encourage all founders here to think about is the power of a big, bold vision. Facebook in India had 3 different charters. One, we had a global charter because we were building global operations that served their now 3.5 billion users. When we started, I remember hitting the 500 million user mark globally very quickly. In a few years, it was 1 billion, and now we're talking about over 3.5 billion. So how do you think of that kind of scale? And there's no amount of prep for that kind of scale. You really have to learn along the job and look at cues and continue to iterate. So we had a global charter. We also had a regional charter. Asia Pacific SMB business was started, the focus started in India. And then as it got to several hundred million, we moved those headquarters to Singapore. And then 3, what's most relevant to the audience here is probably the India charter, although I'm so delighted about the number of companies here that have global presence and global businesses. So yeah, all of these lessons apply in Spain. So we had an India market charter. And there, Anjali, what we did was my first message that I said, I hope people remember, the power of a big, bold vision. We actually sat with the whole team at the leadership level, at the grassroots level, because your vision is nothing but the combined vision of all of the people working in the organization. And we asked them to visualize what would we want Facebook India at an India market level to look like, call it 4 years from now. It was a long process. It was not overnight, and we went back and forth. And the vision for the India market, what we formulated was 100, 100, 100. I don't know if the audience can respond via chat, but I would have asked if they can, what they think the 100, 100, 100 is. Can they respond, Anjali and Manish?
You keep talking. I'm going to post a question in actually Q&A. They may catch it faster.
All right. So our 100, 100, 100, and I'm just going to tell you so we can use other questions, was 100 million users on the platform, not surprisingly. The second 100 was 100 million in revenue, and the third 100 was 100 million people that we wanted to touch through our community efforts. And people usually get the first one, and the second and the third one are a little off. They say 100% growth, which also was the case. But those were our 3 goals. And remember, at this time, we didn't even have 100 million people on the internet, right? And we had no commitment from Facebook headquarters to even build out a sales team. So all of this was a true BHAG of all magnitude, but it really bonded the team together. Facebook, like every other multinational company, was structured functionally. So user growth, for example, would report in regionally and globally. But this really bound the India team together. And sure enough, give or take a few quarters, we hit each one of these goals. So the power of a big bold vision, really investing in the mantra of in God we trust, and for all else we use data, and incorporating scale into everything that we do at all levels, were all key parts of building the business, Anjali.
Great. And I also would like to ask you to take us through some of what the narratives on those slides were when you made presentations back to the FP mothership to really convince them to double down on what was a frontier market like India in the 2010-11 timeframe. And what are some of the lessons for country managers in emerging markets, as well as for entrepreneurs, I would say?
Yeah, I would say when entrepreneurs, there's massive amounts of evangelization one is doing, right? Internally
Exactly.
and externally all the time. So if you can share whatever you can share.
Totally. One thing that everyone should know, people like the analogy on the anecdote about people asking me, oh, I want growth managers with products that are not as viral. There is an assumption that if you're building Facebook in India, you have an endless balance sheet and you can do whatever you want. But having been on both sides, both building companies within the umbrella of Facebook, as well as being on the other side as an investor, both early stage as well as growth stage, I will tell you, it's actually more difficult to get funding internally within an organization than get external money from investors. Okay, so it was really, really hard. And we had to really fight for every single headcount and make a business case for it. It was like going and presenting to your investors and making a case of why is it that you need the next 20 million or million, or again, even 100,000 for a set of hires that you needed to make. So what worked? There is, especially in this hybrid world, communication is just so important. How is it that you can really give all of your stakeholders the context that you have that others might not have? For us, it really was valuable to have the executives be on a steady visit to the country. I remember Chris Cox, the Chief Product Officer, he came and he, somewhere along that way, we actually at headquarters instituted something called 2G Tuesdays, where the engineering team would work on a network that felt more like 2G, so that people would really feel and experience the pain that people in these markets were having, because it's very, very difficult for you to conceptually talk about it. So how is it that you can truly have the right stakeholders experience the need? I used to have, when I was building, even in prior organizations where I led product and engineering, we used to have this constant strife of engineering saying, sales doesn't sell what we have, and sales saying engineering doesn't build what we need. I used to send both of them to trips to go meet with the clients together. And it is so powerful to have the people who are building the product hear directly what the pain point is, and them then thinking about what is the solution, which might just be far different from what even the sales team might be able to convey. So those were some techniques and tactics that we used to help make the case globally. And I guess the last thing is not giving up. It's very easy to say, it is hard to bubble up key messages, and this will happen anywhere, but knowing what you need to do and what you believe in, and keeping at it, persistence pays off. It might not happen in the time frame that you really want and have all the impatience that's really a key of success too, but know that sometimes it's just a matter of keeping at it, and the door will open.
It's super interesting, Kritika. I was actually, a couple of moments just flashed in my head. One was, I don't know, it was Taj in Bombay, I think. Those early days, right? When I could see the tension between you seeing the opportunity you were on the ground, yet making sure that message is communicated effectively, right, and repeatedly, where the mothership sort of buys into it. So I just a moment flashed. I think we're having tea or coffee, and you were sharing some of those challenges back in the day. Quite interesting, and congratulations for winning that battle many times, and helping Facebook become what it did in India and other markets.
So when I relocated back, initially the business was doing 400 million, and just before I relocated, we got approval to double the sales and marketing team on the vision to $1 billion, and the team just crossed that threshold a few months ago. Kudos to Ajit and the fabulous team that they're doing there.
Congratulations! It's interesting. We have you and Rajan also was on the same day. I remember Google celebrated the 1 billion revenue number also. In quite in fashion. I'm sure you're being asked to come and join the party at Facebook India. I don't know if you can. If you can, please come and see us as well. But I'm sure you'll take a lot of pride in all the operating levers and the leadership team and talent that you put in place before you left the Indian shores.
It's been a delight to see the team go from strength to strength, and of course, a piece of my heart is always there.
Absolutely. Kritika, actually, that's a very interesting segue into something I was going to ask, and then I see a question pop in from Devanshu Jain, which links to this also.
Yeah.
The question I was going to ask is, when you think about, look, you've done, if I may use eclectic things, and like in a positive way, and done it so well everywhere in, growth investor and setting up investment vehicles to like leading SPAC with Athena that you're doing. I'm sure people will take notice of what Athena accomplishes over time, and F7 Ventures, and of course on the corporate side, just building businesses. So you clearly have scaled yourself up many times. I don't know if it's through rebooting and pivots, or is it just a nice linear curve? But the question was going to be like, what things early in your career or anything else in your life has helped you scale in all of those dimensions so effectively? So trying to draw some of the lessons from your experience. And the question that Devanshu had is something similar, that I don't know if you pick these cues in your impressive corporate experience, or is it something else? Like, what would you advise to entrepreneurs as they think about scaling their own dimensions along with scaling of their companies and businesses and products?
There is scale that one can prepare for, and then there is scale that you simply have to learn on the job. And you have to be very conscious about both sides. I did the Everest Base Camp trek, right? I knew what to do, how to prepare for it, could read books about it, ask a lot of people, and do it. Then there is scale of building global operations for a company that hits a 500 million user mark, and then it goes all the way up to 3.5 billion, or going from writing $50,000 checks with F7 where we wrote first checks for entrepreneurs, to going to SoftBank where our minimum check size was 100 million. So those are just different kinds of scale that one has to. When you talk about what has prepared me for that, what I remember is my early childhood growing up, where we moved several different places. So you very quickly learn to be adaptable and go with the flow. You can just handle things that are thrown other way. So that's an important skill, adaptability. Two, an early lesson was also from my undergrad university, where because I moved so much, I could not apply to the government colleges. And I went to a private college, MGM College of Engineering in Nanded. I remember the first year, we didn't even have a campus. It was in a high school setting. And when I graduated with the university's second rank, which included the colleges I could not apply to. And it just seeped in mind something that my dad told me, where he said, you can do nothing with great opportunities, or you can make the most of the opportunities in front of you. And again, that's a lesson that I learned very early in life. So taking that to being in the spirit of constant learning, just absorbing from all different quarters and learning. is something really important. Devanshu, a really important part of it is one, pick investors who can help guide you. And that's what you're doing here. Build a community of people, both who are in the same stage that you are, as well as companies that are ahead of you. For me, the framework when it comes to mentoring, or the question that you asked, it's the image of a person walking. There are people in front of you, there are people besides you, and there are people behind you. From people in front of you, seek inspiration. From people beside you, seek community. And from people behind you, lend them a helping hand. And the beauty of that picture is that applies no matter what stage of your company you're in. So just think about that.
Quite amazing. Wow, a lot packed in there to reflect on. There's a question actually was asked earlier, and I was thinking in the earlier panel, I was thinking of putting it, somewhere in the mind frame that when Kirtika shows up, we have to ask her. It makes sense in this current context of the conversation. How have you retooled, reskilled yourself along the way, like in major significant ways? What has helped you?
When I started with Facebook in India, I was tasked with leading operations, global operations. I came from a product world, and although of course I'd interfaced with operations, I never really built operations before. Then when I raised my hand to go run sales, again, I was alongside people who had done sales for 30 years. When I joined investing, I joined people who have done just investing for 20, 30 years. That mindset of learning is important. Cheryl told me this when I started with Facebook, and I asked her, Cheryl, I want to really make a big impact. What's your advice for me? She said, Kirtika, you haven't grown up in the operations organization, so make sure that you take the time to understand the nitty-gritty of what it means to run operations, because that is what will give you the strength to operate at a 20,000, 30,000 foot level. I took that to heart, and through my time with Facebook, when I was building operations, every week I would sit down with the operations team and really try to understand what's happening at that grassroots level. What are the users saying? What are they asking for? And fast forward that to when I ran sales, how do you do forecasting? How do you do tracking? Recognizing when I'm feeling that fear and anxiety, and just turning the table and say, okay, I'm feeling this anxiety. It's a really important part of my job. What is it that I need to do to get really good at it? Whether it was, in that case, working with a peer mentor, Jane Lung from Greater China, phenomenal sales leader. She came down, spent time with me, helped me ramp up. Fast forward, by the way, to investing. I remember the first few deals, I did all of the modeling myself. I downloaded Capital IQ, did, all the
this is for audiences context, early days of SoftBank, right? Yeah.
SoftBank. This is at SoftBank. Yeah. And by the way, we've had many associates, and they were, what is she doing? Why is she not giving this to us? And of course, I took like 10 times more time from them getting my questions answered versus them just doing it themselves. But it was just so important for me to know what it takes to do this job in entirety, so that I could ask the right questions and then step back to the investment. So those are some things that I have invested in that have really helped me scale Manish and Anjali.
Very interesting. I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and it's a bit of a tactical, highly contextual question, but this is about WeWork. And of course, just forewarning again, this session is being recorded and will be shared. So you're on the board, it's a listed company, say what you can, but it's just something that I couldn't have not asked, right? This company was almost written off in 2019. And then of course, also saw the worst of what any company can see from a pandemic, COVID point of view, direct sort of headwinds to what it has really done is mind-boggling. And it's clearly has a lot of people have played a role here, and I know Kirtika, you along with your partners at SoftBank have played an instrumental role here. So the question was more or less specific about what WeWork may or may not have done, but what could one learn from this experience for, let's say, growth businesses, entrepreneurs that in India and elsewhere also are going through cycles, right? COVID has provided tailwinds to some, but headwinds to many. And if there is a winter coming, as it feels like from a private funding markets point of view, there could be another interesting, trough in the cycle. What lessons could you share from this experience of resurgence and, thriving and coming out of crisis and then thriving after that from the WeWork experience? If you can share it, it'll be great.
Manish, a lot of people ask me, what made you decide to join the WeWork board at the time that you did? Because we were just coming off of the situation that you described. For me, one, it was a very strong connect with the mission. So, and I would say, think about, again, for founders, and are you focused on the right problem? Are you solving a real problem? Is there value in solving the problem? And in the case of WeWork, it was just very clear to me. I opened 7 offices when I was with Facebook in India. I would have loved to have a WeWork to be able to quickly scale and have the flexibility that WeWork offered. When SoftBank Vision Fund opened its office in India, it was a WeWork office. So I have seen what I had to do without a WeWork office, and I've seen how quickly startups and large companies have been able to scale using a WeWork. So first, there was a very strong connect of the vision. And so I would say the first thing is make sure that you examine, are you solving a real problem, and is there value to solving the real problem? And coming to then what Marcelo, who took on as chairman, and Sandeep soon after, who came on board as a CEO, did, was a strong focus on fundamentals. We started the conversation talking unit economics, digging deep into what are the unit economics dynamics. Is there a path to making this a profitable business? And very clearly laying out a 5-year strategy that got us there was another very big part of the turnaround. And the third part of the turnaround was back to taking bold steps. There was a 5-year strategic turnaround plan. Sandeep, the CEO, came on board and he said, why are we taking these many years to cut costs by $1 billion plus? We just should rip the bandage off and just get there faster. And it's the right thing for the business. It's the right thing for the people. And so that bold move was also what set us up at a much better place when COVID hit, because we had already started being very bold and very aggressive in getting the unit economics to shape and setting the company on a path to profitability. So those were my big learnings. And I saw this bold thinking and big giant steps. Manish, Anjali, also when Facebook went public. If people remember, the stock dipped significantly when it went public, and we were slammed at not having a mobile monetization strategy. What I saw Mark do was masterful in terms of how he shifted a 4,000 people company to focus on mobile, or changes where there was no longer a mobile division and a desktop division. There was just people working on a product that took both into account. If people walked in with product reviews that didn't start with mobile, he would literally stop the meeting and say, this meeting doesn't happen. We couldn't hire that quickly with mobile engineers, so we put a ton of training in place. How quickly we pivoted and the bold steps that we took was really instrumental in making that turnaround to where we are today.
Amazing. Really amazing. Lot to reflect on there. I want actually one topic here, which Anjali and I are both passionate about. The difference is she does something about it. I just talk about it. I think for the large part, and Kirtika, you have made massive strides in that area. So I think it would be best if Anjali asked this question and not me.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for that. And I think, this is obviously the question of the huge responsibility that you carry as a woman leader, right? And while none of us shun, ownership of the fact that each of us have to work twice as hard, and everyone doesn't necessarily get the same set of opportunities to get to where you are. And India, we're not proud of the fact that our statistics are actually getting worse, not better. And the pandemic has worsened that significantly. Just 7% of Indian urban women are even part of the workforce. But aside from just coming out every day and speaking about it and boiling up the ocean, would love to just understand some of the playbooks and initiatives that you're actually part of that you think have worked. And having spent time in both markets, what do you think we should do differently in order to solve this, really top of funnel problem?
At SoftBank, if I take my most recent experience, I deployed $1 billion of new capital across enterprise, health tech, deep tech, gaming. My last investment was a crypto NFT investment, managed an overall portfolio of over 5 billion, including the ones that I inherited.
By the way, I'm sorry I'm interrupting. I didn't know that. I only realized it when I heard your panel on NFTs a day or 2 days ago, whenever that was. And here it goes. I said, there's another hidden talent and experience tool that Kritika possesses. So now it's all making sense. Sorry for that.
All right. So, and as much that I feel so grateful for the impact that I was able to make on the investing side, Anjali and Manish talking about playbooks, and I feel just as deeply about the impact on the diversity and inclusion side and the platform that SoftBank really gave me to advance our initiatives there. So we took it in 3 different dimensions. First, it always starts internally. So our CHRO had created a diversity council, diversity mandates. I came partnered very closely with her. We set up affinity groups, whether it's for gender, LGBTQ, underrepresented minorities, made sure that there was the right executive sponsors for these affinity groups, set goals in terms of what we wanted to do in terms of our hiring goals. I joined as the first female investing partner, but I was thrilled that by the time I left, we had 3. And now we also have our first female investing managing partner in Lydia, who I'm so excited about and thrilled to see that that's how far we have come. That's internally. 2, we did a lot in terms of our ecosystem. So for example, I sponsored and championed an initiative called Connect and Lead, where we brought together women leaders across our ecosystem. So rising women leaders. So with a very business oriented goal, how is it that we can help create the same kind of networks that men naturally have between these women, so that someone can Uber, can pick up a call and talk to someone at WeWork and just have the kind of business discussions that come so naturally when you have those connections. The last thing that I championed was then looking at a program called Emerge, which is a fund for brilliant companies by diverse founders. We had our CEO summit of, and the numbers, as you can see, of how many women CEOs were there were dismal, and I came back feeling sick, really sick that those were the numbers. And again, my CHRO and I, we partnered to launch this initiative along with a tremendous set of people. And that now has launched in Europe. We also have the Opportunity Fund that focuses on the Black, Hispanic, Latinx, Native American community. So those are some of the initiatives, Anjali and Manish, that we can really do. But there's one message here that I just want to leave. It's that it's about these big initiatives, but it's also about what we do every single day. Manish, Anjali, if I had noticed a little bit before, I did notice that you had in your keynote speakers 3 men and 1 woman. I would have told you, where's that 50-50? Okay, so I'm sure next time that will happen. But it's truly what we can do. And I take responsibility that I did not highlight it. I should have, right? And I have done that in the past. I had a dean of a major school, and it was not Dean John Levin, just given my role with Stanford Business School. Let me just clarify that, but a different dean who came and was visiting SoftBank, and he was bringing his colleagues with him from academia. And guess what? There were 3 white men who were going to show up. I just sent him a note. I said, surely you have some amazing diverse academic faculty that you can bring with you. That's all I said. And he brought someone who was amazing, made her go first, and she was phenomenal. So it is in the big things, but honestly, even more importantly, it's what everyone here does every single day.
Yeah, thank you for making it real, and thank you for spotting that gap in equal representation. We certainly need to get better there, but we'll try. Thank you for that push and that nudge. Actually, I want to ask a question. Which
you didn't think this was
asked.
going to be easy, right? I mean, of course, I would ask you.
With you, it's never right. You're going to keep everybody on their toes. I know Anjali may have some other question, but I also looked at this one. It's often talked about, right? Find mentors at the right time and right, stages of your life, but easier said than done. Like, how do you spot, find, engage mentors? Is there a mentor model that you want to discuss here and share with entrepreneurs? Because almost everybody's found this job is so lonely, right? Entrepreneurship, even if you have co-founders, it still gets lonely in your own space of growth and scaling. Any models that you would recommend that have worked for you, or you think could work for entrepreneurs, in the larger scheme of things?
I am a person who believes in taking help from every quarter that I can possibly get. Okay. So, and I have approached mentorship in many different ways. One, I've approached mentorship for specific skills. When I was doing product management at Good that was acquired by Motorola, one of the things that I really wanted to work on was communication skills. And by the way, even if you ask me 30 years from now, what are the things that you're working on, I'll talk communication, because I think one can never get good enough with communication, and something that you constantly work on. So I went to my CMO and said, you're going to see me present to the CEO many times over the year. In addition to participating in the conversation, I would love it if you just give me feedback on, did I present well? Did I come across concisely? Did I provide the right context? I would love just ongoing feedback. And Shiva, guess what? People love to be asked for feedback, right? And love to be asked for help. And especially if you make it so easy, because I was not asking her for any additional big burden of time. It was, she was going to be there in the meeting. I'm going to be there in the meeting. I'm just asking her to watch for something else in addition to what she would ask me, and just talk me 2 or 3 lines after the session. It was game changing in terms of the investment that she made in me and how I felt that I had grown. And of course, it's something that I will continue to work on. So think about skills specific training. Then there is just leadership. How do you think about career? And a construct that is often suggested is have your personal board of directors, who are the 2, 3, 4 people that you will go reach out to as you want input on major life decisions and how to do things. And of course, think about whose board of directors you are on. Always think about where you can give back. I've also found huge support from communities. H2 India is a community of tech entrepreneurs that I was part of the founding team. Rajan was also there. And when we started, we probably had like 5 tech executives, and it's so tremendous to see the growth in that community. So whether it's H2 or other communities like that, think about how is it that you can leverage communities. And the final thing that I'll say is executive coaches and even therapy. I used to think about, you only need therapy if you don't have good friends to talk to, but it's a whole different ballgame. Even like having executive coaches, where she will sit down with me every single month, keep me accountable to my goals, versus people that I go to on an ad hoc basis. So leverage different sources of help, mentorship, guidance to make you your best self.
Amazing. And you said personal board of directors. Did I hear it right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's the first one I've heard that. That's amazing. Says so much. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing something personal also, which will really help all of us.
I'd just like to get a couple of more questions in, given I'm also conscious of time here, but would love to get, given your operator lens as well as investor lens, would love to get your view in the India context, of course, on what are like the next, 2, 3 areas of tech innovation that are keeping you excited or get you excited, given India's competencies.
Anjali, when I moved from an operating executive role to an investing role, Deep Mishra, the senior managing partner at SoftBank, now with General Catalyst, he said, Kirtika, in a operating career, you get to see technology transformations linearly and sequentially, one at a time. Whereas in an investing role, you get to see multiple such transformations happening at the same time. So it is so exciting to see the number of industries that are being disrupted and the technology innovations that are disrupting. AI and data changing the world was a key thesis for the Vision Fund, and we're just at the beginning of seeing that play out in across sectors, whether it's agtech, edtech, enterprise, health tech. So that's one whole area. Deep tech, I've been very excited about seeing the deep tech companies coming from India, still very early nascent, but how is it that grows? Personally, at a global level, very excited about where crypto, NFTs, blockchain is going. And I was seeing some of the stats, even in India. I think I heard 6% of people in India have Manish is smiling. He's probably one of those, top 10
it's something we've all heard. We just can't believe it, but you hear it all the time.
Right? Yeah. And by the way, when we started Facebook operation in India, 8 million people were on Facebook in India, right? And this was, by the way, not 20 years ago. This was 2010, 8 million people on Facebook in India. So transformation can happen very quickly. And think about the kind of change that you can see in decades. And back to your question, Anjali, about women representation, it is so important to do it right from the very beginning. Maxine Williams, who's the Chief Diversity Officer at Facebook, in her report 2 or 3 years ago, she said, if we really want to get to 50-50, we almost have to fire everyone and start again, because it is impossible to kind of catch up. It will, and the numbers for gender equity continues to move out by decades and decades. So what are we seeing that is coming up? And how is it that we can make sure that we have the right gender representation or other kinds of diversity from the very beginning is going to be so important. And we have a diversity crisis across, in terms of the roles that people play, AI talent. Even the biggest companies like Google and Facebook, we have 10 or 15% representation. And if you want to build products that are human-centered, ethical, innovative, you need to have that diversity. As you can tell, I'm deeply passionate about this topic, and I can't encourage and push everyone in this audience to really think deeply about it.
Great. Would love to actually just ask you a follow-on question on that. And very interesting that you said how important it is to keep, even talking about it and doing things about it. But one thing, at least I've always noticed, is that people tend to talk about their experiences more in the past tense and not really fully be authentic in sharing what they're currently going through. And with women, it's even harder to find women in the same peer group, or like you said, community as you're walking along in your journey, who are experiencing the same things with the same velocity as you are. And in the run up to this, I was so excited to learn that you're writing this book. And in many ways, I thought you're actually choosing to write it now when you're right at the peak and the best, I'm sure the best is yet to come for you. But just keen and curious to understand, why did you choose this time, and why do you think the time is now to share your journey, and just what was the backstory to deciding to publish your story?
Anjali, I truly believe that the best is yet to come. Facebook has posters 1% done. I truly believe 1% done. We will all live to be 80, 90, 100 and beyond, unless something untoward happens. So I still have a few decades to continue to make an impact, and I have big, bold goals. Why the book and why now? I actually signed the contract for the book with my agent 3 years ago. And SoftBank was so intense that I didn't have a chance to really work on it. My agent has patiently pinged me every month, And I have promised her that it's going to be a better book now than if I had done it 3 years ago, because it's actually a good time. It's a good time to have enough time to step away from my experience of building Facebook India, which is a key storyline in the book. It's about my experience building high growth businesses with that as a storyline. But of course, I bring in my experiences from before Facebook and what I have seen from the investing lens after. So that's a key storyline. Another storyline is the journey of a woman in technology. And if there is something there that helps even one person find tips, tools, techniques to strive for bigger, bolder, more ambitious goals, I would consider that a good use of me spending this time. And third, Anjali and Manish and team, is also for me a celebration of the people who helped build Facebook India. When I started Facebook in India, I had committed to interviewing the first 100 hires. And as all of you know, the first 100 hires means I spent a lot of time hiring. But as part of this book, I am actually reaching out to the first 100, getting their stories and how it shaped them personally, professionally, and what they take with them. And so it's a matter truly of the heart, mind, soul, and spirit. If I walk out today and get hit by a bus, my SPAC will happen, my funds will happen, everything else will happen. I feel this is a book that I can uniquely write. So it is an important priority and something that I do want to prioritize. It is not easy given the velocity of things, and there are many other commitments coming to you where you're accountable to someone else. But this is when it's so personal, it's making it a priority and making time for it is important. So thank you for asking. And as I share it here, again, it keeps me even more accountable to make sure that I carve out the time and share.
We'll remind you, chapter 3, where it is tomorrow morning.
I know. On my flight, it's my task for my 5-hour flight. So that's.
Are you still on the East Coast?
I am. So it's not. It was it's not quite 6:30. So thank you for that.
How do you keep it all together and do it all? But anyway, you answered that already. All
right. But actually, let me tell you, how do I keep it all together? I mean, I know so one. Truly, it is about surrounding yourself with people who believe in you almost more than you believe in yourself. If any of you are in the stages of thinking about your right partner, the partner that you choose will be the most important career decision that you make, more than what industry you're focused on, what you're doing, what your hiring decisions are. So really choose the right partner. I wouldn't be here having this conversation if not for just extraordinary support and encouragement from my husband, Dave. That's one. Two, there was a time where people felt keep work and life separate. I go back home and I talk to my girls about what's going on in work, and they know when I'm having a busy time. And equivalently at work, if my mom is having a surgery and I need to go, they know, and they then support me and accommodate me. So bringing your whole self both to work and to life has been an important part of keeping it all together. The other practice that I picked up at Facebook was this practice of writing your big, bold vision. So you're already in March. So every one of you, think about, let's say it's January 1st, 2023. What is it that you want to look back on in the year? And it could be a short paragraph, it could be long in detail. They say just writing it down makes it 42% more likely that you will make it happen. So why wouldn't you take those odds of just writing it down? And if you actually share it, it becomes even higher. And by the way, when I talk about having processes that really scale, at Facebook, we had a leader who championed this, and we used to actually allocate time to actually write a personal vision statement, which included both personal and professional, and managers. And to the extent that people were comfortable sharing, they would share it with their managers. And as a manager, I would then be expected to not just make sure that we're nurturing the professional goals, but also make sure that we have things in place to nurture and foster personal goals.
Very interesting. And again, super sensitive of time.
Yes.
I see we have less than 5 minutes left. I want to ask one last question. If Anjali has any, maybe she can ask her final one as well. But mine is a bit about Athena, because look, when you look at it from a distance, it's a SPAC, and SPACs have had their good days, and we'll see where SPACs will go. But there's so much behind it, right? You peel the onion, and the way it's come together, who's behind it, you and your partners. I mean, it's a very incredibly differentiated, almost mission behind it. But that's what I read publicly. Actually, I've never had a chance to speak to you about why Athena. What is Athena trying to accomplish? I mean, I know it's scaling up, and so obviously some good things are happening, but from your own words, from the horse's mouth, why Athena? What is it trying to do?
Manish, I had 3 companies from my SoftBank portfolio that went public via a SPAC. The first one was IonQ. It's a quantum computing company. I invested 61 million in that earlier last year. And given that SoftBank is a public company, we actually have to disclose these results. So the last quarterly results that we published, that 61 million was 118 million. And this is all in a matter of within a year, right? 2, WeWork went public via a SPAC as well. So having seen those experiences from the other side, I knew that there were like certain use cases where in both of these companies really, and again, there were different choices to stay private, go public. If you're going public, for these companies, the examples that I gave, IPO, the SPAC was really the preferred route to go public. So having seen that, I knew that there was a market for, and I knew that there was a use case for really transformative companies that would really benefit from the SPAC route. So that was part 1. Then I met with Isabel, who is the founder of the Athena franchise of SPACs. She was seeing, and Anjali, this goes back to your question of what can we do on the gender side. She also was looking at SPACs for her portfolio company. She had a fund, and she saw that the 3% of SPACs had any woman in management team and C-level positions. And as SPAC was seeing this re-emergence as a way of going public, wanting to be there and make sure that there are as many women as possible to participate in that resurgence was important to her. So she created this series of all female-led SPACs. And what it did was that it attracted phenomenal people. On my board, I have Judith Roden, who has been on the boards of BlackRock and Citi and Aetna and Comcast and EDS and many private companies, the first female president ever of Ivy League University, UPenn, first female president of Rockefeller. And she's just one of now about 30 people who are in the Athena franchise. So we have very clearly and very quickly established ourselves as one of like the top 5 quality SPACs in the market with operator investor expertise, execution superpowers, and a focus on long-term value creation versus many other SPACs for whom it's transactional. And for me, of the many things that I could choose to do, it was a mission in addition to, of course, the financial profile of SPAC returns that made it the right thing for me to do.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so if there are amazing companies that you know of, transformative companies that are in deep tech, health tech, enterprise, fintech, who are rightly valued in the 1.5 billion to 4 billion range, please send them to us. We are truly one of the top 5.
I think the macro is aligning to give you a lot of opportunities, rightly valued as well. Yes. Lots of great companies, but they'll also be rightly valued very soon. Absolutely. Would love to help out with that if we can. Anjali, do you have I don't know, it's so hard, right? We keep going on with Kirtika, and we may not have covered like 2% of our life. I
actually want to ask the participants a question of what they will remember and what they will take away.
Should we post?
Sure. Yes.
Post it. Yeah. We're also getting questions in from our social. So let me just first post this. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, let's keep checking that. Sorry, we're getting a lot of feeds. Some are here, some are elsewhere. This was a question, but we'll see. I don't know, we'll get response in real time or not. But this was a question that came up in our internal discussion yesterday as we were planning through these, and two people in consonance said, how Manish, how long do you know Kritika? Is she like, did she grow up in India? Is she an India person? Is she like a US person? I said, look, I don't think I can like box her, because she's done amazing things in both markets. She took a frontier decision to come back to a frontier market, and then she's back and doing amazing things in the US, and she's still involved. Actually, maybe that's a question, audience will generally have, Kritika, when they look at your rich background. I mean, is 5 years out, 10 years out, is it going to continue? You're going to keep picking the best themes from both markets, financial markets, as well as, value creation in businesses. Are you going to be like, or are you going to pick one over the other? Where are we going to see you in, 10 years from now?
Yeah.
And sorry, one did come up. Creating good company culture, importance of D&I for learning and scaling. Interesting question. So I don't know, whichever one you want to answer.
No, totally. No, he said that was, Devanshu said that was his takeaway, which is good to hear. Yeah. About culture and D&I for learning and scaling. On D&I for learning and scaling, again, it's not just about gender diversity. I remember when we were hiring the sales team for Facebook in India, the first hire came naturally from Google. The second hire also came from Google. The third hire was someone who they came from Yahoo, or at least the third candidate who was just amazing, who we wanted to hire. And I actually put my foot down and I said, listen, we are selling in a market where print, television, radio are dominant. We really need people with that expertise. And on one hand, I had the team protesting, saying, but this is such an amazing candidate. We are trying to build, we have such aggressive goals. We really need that person now. I said, we will, if that's the right, if that is really the right candidate, it'll work out at some later point of time. But at this point, I really, really want to make sure we have people from print, radio, television. And so sure enough, the team worked harder, bought us the right candidates. We got print, radio, television. And by the way, we went back 3 months later and we did hire this amazing person from Yahoo. And of course, one angle of that could be the team said, you wasted 3 months of our time. We could have just hired that person first. But in my view, if I hadn't put my foot down, we would have never gotten my print radio, right? So think about diversity as needed for your business. And it's a really important takeaway. And thank you for all of the other takeaways that you're sending.
It's quite a few. And actually,
two more that I'm getting on the show. How much time do we have, Manish?
I think we probably should wrap up because you are rolling into your next session. Yeah. So then as I wrap up, Manish, to answer your question, for me, I land in India, I feel I'm home. I land in the US, I feel I'm home. I'm very grateful to have 2 countries I feel at home in, and I could not be more excited to be among the set of founders. I spoke about building operations for 3.5 billion users, building a business that's now $1 billion plus, managing a portfolio of 5 billion, but beyond all of those numbers, even thinking about my Facebook India journey, being at the heart of a country that was going mobile, going digital, seeing the impact that it had on people, businesses, economy, society was truly life satisfying. And as I think about all of the visions that this Zoom session represents and all of the ways that the founders and the teams here are changing the way we live and work, that is what drives me, motivates me, and gives me so much energy. So thank you, Manish. Thank you, Anjali, for having me.
What a wrap as a message. Kritika, thank you so much. I mean, you are our last keynote, by the way, and we reserve the better gender for the end. I have to make up for
Good save.
And thank you so much. I mean, thank you for having a very candid chat with both Anjali and me, and sharing so much that we'll actually keep reflecting on for a while. Thank you very much, Kritika, for your time. Have a safe flight back and hope you get done what you want to get done until tomorrow.
Until tomorrow. All right.
So much, Kritika, and I hope it's not just about chapter 3, but many, many, many chapters ahead for you in the coming weeks and days and years. But thank you so much for giving us your time this evening.
Thank you, Anjali. Thank you, Manish.
Have a nice day. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
I think it's a wrap.